we think that the uniform we wore, whether it's, Army, Marines, firefighter, law enforcement, whatever it is, we think that that gives us purpose. It doesn't. It fuels our purpose. Our purpose is much deeper than that uniform we put on.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Tracer Burnout. I'm Dan.
I'm Roger.
And we have a great guest for you today. But before we get into that, if you would like to support the show and you like what we're doing here, you can go over into the description section of however you're consuming this, and you will see our affiliates there. And of course, if you purchase something through our affiliates, we get a small percentage of that. But if you like what we're doing and you want to support us, but you don't need stuff, what can they do, Raj?
Head on over to tracerburnout.com, scroll all the way down to the bottom. There is a donate button, and that'll come to us via PayPal. We appreciate that. That is a small self-funded operation we have going here. So we appreciate any help. For any new viewers, listeners we have to the show, welcome.
Yeah. And if you want to follow more of us, because Roger, the local social media guru between the two of us, he shudders in disdain, but he is actually all over it. He would appreciate it if you went over to our social media pages, all the ones that you can name except TikTok.
We're not on Chinese spyware. But we're on American spyware, which is meta. So give us a like and a follow over there. We're trying to beef up our Instagram presence, by the way. Most of the same stuff we do on Facebook on Instagram, but just help us out. Go over there, give us a follow.
Yeah. The videos are always on YouTube and Rumble, and a quick link to them and everything else about us is through the website, where we have the most recent episodes posted there, as well as a little bit more about us, in case you're brave enough to venture into that.
If you're so inclined.
Yeah.
So, without further ado, we welcome Marine Corps veteran Michael Parker. Stay tuned.
Michael, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, great. Well, we're very fortunate that you were in town, and we'll get into why that is later. But yeah, we appreciate you being here.
This is our first in-studio episode we've shot in a couple months. So it's actually good for us to be back in here. We were on the road last month, so good stuff.
Yes.
That's awesome. This is my first in a studio podcast interview ever, so it's pretty cool.
It's more of an interrogation room, but if you want to call it a studio, that's fine.
This slick corporate product that we put together here.
Yes.
Definitely get the interrogation vibes sitting here.
we like the light gray. That's what we went with.
But, all right, so we get started typically with family history of service. So does your family have a history of service?
Yeah, so I know, my great-grandfather was in the Army in World War I. I don't know a whole lot about that. Him and one of his brothers. And then my great-grandpa was in World War II. I know he was in the Airborne, 101st. Nobody really knows what he did, but we were kind of told he didn't see combat or anything, but he had PTSD and stuff like that. And when we got his service records, there was a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart. So obviously he saw combat somewhere. Nobody knows when or where or what.
Did he die young?
No, I think he died a couple years before I was born.
Okay.
So, he lived a full, long life, but he didn't really talk about it, but there's clearly signs that he definitely saw combat somewhere.
That generation tended not to talk too much about it.
Yeah.
But have you ever thought about trying to get a hold of his records and unit history and stuff like that?
So I think my mom has all of that kind of stuff. That's how we found out about the medals and stuff. But I think a lot of those records were burned in St. Louis.
Yeah.
And so there's not a whole lot.
Fire. Yeah.
Actually, you're not the first person that we've talked to that has tried to dig into it and found out that the government stored all of this sensitive information in one warehouse that happened to be built out of wood, and then the wood protection material was gasoline, and yeah.
And then let's see, that was my great grandpa. My grandpa on my dad's side was a submariner during the Vietnam era. My dad, so not to get confusing, but my biological father is a Marine, and then my dad who raised me. He was a Marine and then went National Guard and then active duty Army. He just retired last summer. Yeah, I think it was last summer. And then there's me.
Okay, well, let's talk about you. So where did you grow up?
A little bit of everywhere. I was born in Jonesboro, Arkansas. My mom was going to college out there, which is where she met my dad. They got married when I was about 2. Shortly after that, my dad went active duty Army. He actually tried to go back into the Marines, but it was one of those times where the Marines weren't taking any prior service. So he went to the Army. Ironically, about 6 months later, the Marines give him a call and say, hey, we're taking. He's like, yeah, I'm not switching branches again. As far as I know, he loved it. I loved it. We traveled everywhere. So that was like 96 or 97 is when he went back active duty. Our first station was Fort Stewart, Georgia. So it's probably like 97 because we were there for about 4.5 years because we were there when 9/11 happened. So yeah, that was our first station. Then we went to Fort Lee, and then we were there about 3 years or so, and like 2007, I think. And then we went to Germany for 3 years to bomb holder.
Hey, yeah.
So he switched jobs when we got to Fort Lee. He was a water purifier.
He's a logistician, yeah.
Yeah, and then
I believe it's a water purification specialist.
We're the beneficiaries.
a water dog. I know that's what he always said, was a water dog.
Polly Shore. Yeah, it's good.
I guess they kind of cut that MOS, and he had some friends that were CID. So he made that transition while we were at Fort Lee, went to Leonard Wood for school, and then became an agent. And then we went to Germany. While he was there, he kind of got into the protective service side. He did a couple support missions for them. So his next duty station was Fort Belvoir. So that's what he did for 4 years, which was really cool. I think that was a great time. So back up a little bit. Since I had been able to talk, I wanted to be a Marine, according to my parents. I knew it was pretty young that I decided I wanted to be a Marine, but they said I was like 2.5, 3 years old when I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a Marine. So I always knew that's what I was going to do. When we got to Fort Belvoir, I went to Mount Vernon High School, and they have a Marine Corps JROTC program. So, of course, I was like, well, if I do this, it's going to set me up for that, which it did. I made boot camp a lot easier when we got there because I knew my general orders. I knew a lot of this. Yeah, I knew how to drill. I mean, obviously, drilling with the Springfield and drilling with the M16 is slightly different, but you had the bases down. So it made boot camp, most of it, real simple. So that was a great move on my part. But, yeah, I really loved it, especially being in D.C., there's so much going on. There were so many opportunities to engage in the community.
Yeah, sure.
Honestly, those were some of the best times. Yeah, like a lot of the cool stuff I did was in that time. Did an honor flight with a bunch of World War II vets. Yeah. You want to talk about some grown men that never grew up? They're a bunch of kids at heart.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That was good. I think one of the ones that really got me questioning like why I wanted to be a Marine though was doing the Beirut bombing. We did that, and I remember we were standing there in our blues with roses, laying roses on the graves, and you're looking at all these names, and it really kind of brought into perspective that whole thing of sacrifice. And it was like I guess it was are you willing to make that sacrifice? Is that this? And these are Marines too. It's like that. This is the legacy that you're stepping into. Is that something that you're sure you want to do? And I was, when you're standing there and you're surrounded in Arlington, surrounded by those that paved the way. It's like, is this the legacy? And it was, yeah. Are you willing to make that sacrifice? Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I think that was probably one of the coolest ones. Is that like I loved hanging out with the World War II vets and all that, but like sitting there and seeing like, hey, this is the cost, and you have family members of these guys there. Another big one too was one Mother's Day. It was a Mother's Day. We went out, and it was for Gold Star mothers that lost their sons in Vietnam. And that one was, I'll tell you, it was hard not to cry as you're escorting this mother to where their son's name is on the wall.
Very, very sobering experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think having those experiences really made me question, I wasn't like, oh, yeah, the military is a great idea. This is what I want. It made me actually question and think through why I wanted to serve. It wasn't just because it was a legacy. It was like, is this something you actually want to do? So I think those were all great experiences to make sure I was in the right, mindset going into it.
Being around Gold Star family members and dear friends as well, it's a very grounding experience.
Yeah.
So what year was it that you actually joined the Marines?
So I shipped off to boot camp in September of 2012. September 4th of 2012 to be exact. I was supposed to go earlier in the summer. Again, like I said, both my biological father and my dad were Marines. They both went to San Diego. Now, obviously, since I was on the East Coast at the time, they wanted to send me to Parris Island. But the Marine Corps has a legacy program, so even though we were on the East Coast, since my parents went to the West Coast, I could file for legacy and I could go to the same place they did.
That. Okay.
Yeah. So I put in my application for that. First time I went to MEPS, I get there and they're like, okay, you're set to go to Parris Island. I was like, hold on, time out. I'm supposed to be going to San Diego. Well, they messed up my paperwork and they had me going to Parris Island.
Man, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, the military would never mess up paperwork.
Welcome to the machine.
And I was like, no. And so since they messed it up, I had to wait a whole nother month for the paperwork to get right. And when I went back the second time, I was skinny. I was like 130, 135 pounds, like very tiny. So I go and they failed me at MEPS because they thought I had a concave chest. Then I go and I go to the doc to get evaluated, and they said, no, he's just skinny. So,
we've never seen a skinny young man before.
Yeah, and they're like, no, he's good, he's fine. So that set me back, and I was going to have to wait a whole nother month. But
they were going to let you bulk up a little bit?
Well, no, just because I would have had to wait a whole nother month for the paperwork to go through. Okay. And so I walked back in after getting cleared at MEPS, and the staff sergeant, like jokingly, like he's like, hey, I got to spot this ship next week, and he's like giggling, and I was like, to Parris Island? He was like, yeah, and I was like, F it, send me. He got serious and he was like, what? I was like, bro, I just want to get the heck out of here. I'm tired of waiting. Man.
Let's do this.
I was like, and sure enough, third time's the charm. Ended up on Parris Island. And
the next thing you know, you're in the yellow boot prints, right?
Yeah. You're at 3 o'clock in the morning. We're rolling through the gate, head down, everything. And then all of a sudden, the drill instructor walks on the bus and you're like,
here we go.
Oh, crap. What did I just get into?
You had already been... in the Marine Corps JROTC program, so you knew, you've already said that you knew some things like your general orders and some drill stuff and whatnot. Having the family legacy of service in the Marines, you kind of had a heads up. But what is something that totally caught you off guard? Like, I was not prepared for this.
Oh, I think it's going to be hard. And it's going to suck, boot camp at least, But I don't think anything prepares you for how bad it actually is going to suck until you get there. And you go through like the pool functions where they bring out the drill instructors and they yell at you. Them yelling at you there ain't nothing compared to when you get to Parris Island and the things you see, and they're not supposed to put their hands on you, and drill instructors never would put their hands on you. You see some things and you're like, that guy almost died. you're like, holy crap, you know? I think for me, like, the real sobering moment, it was like, oh, this isn't too bad, you know? Because, like, I think the drill instructors were tired when we got in. Like, they'd probably been up all night. And you go through that hatch and you come in, and you could tell they were kind of just tired. Like,
A hatch is a door.
I do not know about the Marine Corps preparation, but I know as in the Army, the amount of preparation that goes into your day zero reception is absurd. It's absurd, and one of the reasons why, in my opinion, one of the reasons why the drills, the shark attack or whatever at reception, is they're angry. They're tired. They've been away from their family. This is their however many cycles.
It's not day zero for you
in a row. You've been going through all this stuff to get ready for this one moment, and you just want it to be over. So yeah, you're tired and you're angry and you're hungry, and yeah. Hence the shark attack, which apparently we don't do anymore.
It's not day zero for the drill instructors. It's day
2,000.
375.
When you're a drill, your day zero is signing into
exactly.
to that post, and then it's just full go all the time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Which, on that, you think about it, it's like, man, I had to go through 13 weeks of this. But yeah, our drill instructors are on like cycle 3 or 4, and they're just going, and I'm like, y'all literally do boot camp over and over again. Like, how do you? Yeah. When you think about it like that, it's like, wow.
Yeah. I mean, again, I don't know about the Marines, school for their drill instructors, but I mean, drill sergeant school for the Army was a repeat of basic training, and so you've got, drills that already have, they've done their time at whatever station, training trainees, and now they're doing probably a 3rd or 4th year at the schoolhouse, training future drill sergeants, and they're taking them all the way through basic training again. I had the opportunity to do that. I said no. Like, I'm done with basic training.
That's fair. Fair is fair.
Yeah, one time was good enough. I don't know that I'd ever want to be would have ever wanted to be a drill instructor.
So tell us about the Crucible.
Oh man, that was something. So there's something about that hike back that's surreal. So I'll kind of back up in training. Like, one of the first things you do when you get there, you haven't even got your permanent drill instructors yet. You got your temporary drill instructors, and you go out to this old, like, I think it's like an airstrip is what it looks like, and you do your initial IST, which is it's like a 1.5 mile run, crunches, pull-ups, and you do your initial one there for boot camp.
IST is what?
I think it's initial strength training or test or something like that. So it's kind of like a PFT, but instead of 3 miles, it's 1.5 miles, because we do 3 mile runs.
So it's basically like your half of your PT test.
Pretty much, kind of. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you still have to, like, the crunch number and the pull-up numbers are the same, but instead of a 3 mile run, it's a 1.5 mile run, which I don't know why that is, but I don't make the rules. I just follow them. But you're on the buses, going out there, and as we're going out, you see the platoons of the guys coming back from their Crucible. And I remember the drill instructor who was with us, he said, "You see those?" He's like, "Those are Marines. They're finishing their last hike and they're about to become Marines." Yeah. And I remember in that moment, I'm like, 13 weeks.
Yeah.
Which really, actually, it's 12 weeks because you have Marine week. So I was like, 13 weeks from now, that's going to be me.
Yeah.
I was like, we can do it. So yeah, you go through the Crucible, and you get up early as heck in the morning, and it's like dark out. Everybody forms up. You didn't really sleep a whole lot the night before. You're forming up. You got your rucks. You march out. What I found out later during Marine Week is Paris Island's not as big as it felt when you're a recruit. You can drive across the whole base in 5 minutes. They made it feel like Paris Island is this massive place. And I realized we were probably just walking in circles a lot of the time. But
it's a good psychological effect.
Yeah, well, that's why I realized that's why we hiked it early as heck in the morning because you can't tell. But, we go on the hike. I don't remember how much that hike is, but you hike out there, and then you immediately just start doing drills all day into late at night. You're doing, shooting drills. Like, there's some live fire. There's some, just courses and, like, obstacle courses and, like, confidence courses. There's a lot of team building stuff, which really gets interesting when you're sleeping maybe 2 hours a night.
You're cold, tired, wet, and hungry.
Yeah. I think it was 3 MREs for the whole time, and 2 hours of sleep each night. And I don't understand how in 2 days out there with 88 guys, I ended up having fire watch both nights. So I only got maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours of sleep, like both days. So you're tired, you're exhausted. I'll say the instant coffee in the MREs. Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. Just put it in like a dip, and I had like 5 or 6 in my pocket. And for some reason, nobody else wanted their coffee, so I was just collecting it. Yep. Like, I didn't even have to barter for it. I would just be like, "Hey, do you want your coffee?" And people would just give it to me, and I was like, "Cool, I don't have to trade any of my food. That's great."
Oh yeah, I mean, guys would take the little hot sauce bottles, little Tabasco bottles, and put it underneath their nose, so it was kind of like smelling salts, or
that sounds terrible.
Or they put it like on their.
I put
it
a couple times, not in the eyes, but definitely high
Yeah.
cheekbones in this area.
Yep.
Yeah, in the eyes would be a bad day.
Oh, I was about to say, that sounds terrible. Yeah, no, the coffee grounds. Yeah, literally, I put it in at like a dip, and just keep it there. But it gets interesting because you got to do all these team building exercises, and you're all tired, you're all frustrated, and
obviously, when you say team building exercises, you mean trust falls.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's
like
like
corporate America, right? It's a retreat.
It's a retreat that corporate America would be like, what the heck, like pretty much. It's like team building exercises where you've got to take these 2 ladders and get over there and get all of this stuff back.
Is it LRC? Isn't that what we call it?
That's one of them.
Yeah.
Each post has a different course for it.
Yeah, there's
like the leader's reaction course, or
the
something.
TDC, the team development course. Yeah,
there's like so many different ones. I mean, like that's just one that I remember. But there's other ones where you have to get like up here, like you can't touch the ground. You got to do all this stuff and
move this 55-gallon drum from point A to point B, only using this piece of equipment.
Yeah, like one of them was like there's like this pit of sand, and there's like it might not have been sand, but it's kind of like a pit, and there's like elevated surface. And then there's, a platform on the far end, and you have 2 ladders, and you have to use these ladders, or maybe it was only 1 ladder, I can't remember, but you got to get the stuff from over there, and I'm like, hey, why don't we do it this way? And of course, nobody ever wanted to listen to what I had to say, and they were struggling, and I'm like, maybe we should just do it the way I said. Nobody ever wanted to listen to me, so that was frustrating. But then, you're just like, I remember during Crucible, there was a couple times that I almost fought dudes. We were about to fight because we're all tired, we're cranky, and I don't know how much team building actually went on there. We were just like ready to throw down. But it was tough.
Can I tell you a secret? That's part of the training.
It's
the storming and norming and all that. Yes, that is part of the training.
I believe it because I feel like after that most of my friends, we fought at some point, and then we became best friends, and I feel like that's only a military thing.
That is totally by design.
But yeah, I mean it's what, like 56 hours, and you're just like, dude, okay, but like in your mind, like I've gone through everything else. This is my final test. And we were out there doing shooting at and it's like everything too. It's really cool because like all of the team building exercises are named after like a Marine that has won like the Navy Cross or Medal of Honor. And then all of the exercises are like Fallujah, famous battles. Yeah, so there's that history in it, which is really cool because it sets in that that instills that Marine Corps.
You're a part of something now.
Yeah. I think the Fallujah one was probably one of my favorites because you're in the giant sand pit and there's all the barbed wire and stuff, and there's the simulated gun. at least I think it was simulated. I don't know. I've watched some videos and they used live fire, and I was like, were they actually live firing? I don't know. My head was in the dirt the whole time, so I wouldn't know if they were live firing or not.
Yeah.
But
well, I have to tell both of you, I've been to Fallujah. I don't recommend it.
Yeah,
I heard it's beautiful this time of year.
Yeah, I've heard it's a great vacation spot. Yeah, I have some friends, that have been there. Yeah, definitely. Ironically, that's kind of part of why I enlisted too. Speaking on that is, I grew up around the war and all of that. I had friends' parents who didn't come back, or they came back different, whether it was physically or mentally. And then obviously as I grew up, I had friends that went and fought. And originally I was going to go become an officer. I wanted to fly. I wanted to be an aviator. I watched a movie when I was a kid about Blue Angels, and there's one spot reserved for Marine aviator.
That's right.
And I said, I want to be that guy. Applied to the academies, was on that process. And then 2011, we killed Osama bin Laden. And then, what's the name? Obama. Forgot what president was in at the time. Obama was, talking about pulling out of Afghanistan, and I was like, dude, literally this has been a part of my life since I was 8 years old. I don't, I want to go,
Yeah.
So I decided not to get a commission and just enlist. Another fun fact for you guys. So that's why I opted to enlist. I had applied to the Naval Academy, Air Force Academy, and Coast Guard Academy, and had my acceptance to 2 of the 3 before I withdrew. I didn't apply to a West Point, mostly because I figured if I didn't become a Marine by some chance, the Army, most officers don't fly. It's usually warrant officers that do most of the flying, so I'm not going to apply to there because I wanted to fly, regardless of what branch I was in. Not that I had anything against West Point.
No, there's anything wrong with it.
But so that's why I opted to enlist, is because I was like, well, I want to go to Afghanistan before it's over.
Before the war is over.
Yeah, which obviously that didn't happen for another 10 years, but there was this heavy talk about pulling out and that it was done. So I was like, well, I want to go before it's, I guess that's kind of like our generation's Vietnam in a way.
Yes.
And too many ways.
A lot of parallels.
Yeah.
So let's jump forward. You go ahead, Dan.
You had you said 88 guys in your cohort, your company, training.
In our platoon.
In your platoon.
Yeah, I think we started with 93, and we finished with 88. Yeah.
So 88 graduated.
Yeah.
And was it one-stop unit training, or was it? You did all of your basic training there, and then you moved on to another station for your individualized training, your specialty.
Oh yeah, so Marines is a little bit different. So you got 13 weeks of boot camp to become a basically trained Marine, and then you go to, if you're on the East Coast, you go to Jacksonville, North Carolina, just down the road.
Camp Lejeune.
Not far from here.
Yeah. Actually, you go to Marine Corps Air Station New River, which is right outside of there.
Yep.
And on New River is Camp Geiger, which is SOI, School of Infantry. So every Marine's a rifleman. So every Marine goes through School of Infantry. If you're infantry, you go through a 2-month program. If you are any other MOS, you go through MCT, Marine Combat Training, which is part of SOI, and it is a 30-day training. Yeah. You do a lot of the same things that the infantry guys do, just not in as much detail. So there it's you're going on the long rucks with carrying your weapons and gear, and most of it
It's camping.
Yeah, it's a lot of glamping,
Glamping.
Those giant metal tin can buildings. Yep. We slept in those for most of the time. And as you all know, it gets a little cold sometimes in North Carolina.
A bit.
Surprisingly, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize. I thought it would be warmer, but no, it was. I think the highest temperature the whole time I was there, because that was January. So, because I graduated boot camp in November 30th of 2012. Obviously, that's holiday season. Most guys went on recruiter's assistance. I had no interest in that. I was like, I just wanted to speed along. But I ended up getting in hold because they weren't running any platoons. So I ended up on camp guard, which meant you just wander around base in a reflective orange vest with a flashlight.
Where would we be without our PT belts?
Oh, man.
Have y'all seen one of my favorite memes of all time is the famous painting of George Washington crossing the Delaware River, and somebody photoshopped onto each and every one of them it's an army yellow PT belt on. It's one of the funniest things.
I haven't seen that. You'll have to send that to me.
We'll put it up on the screen for the
yeah,
YouTube.
I'm gonna have to see that. I haven't seen that, but I can envision it, and that's funny.
So good.
Yeah, so I got stuck on that for a month through December, and it was cold that whole time too. But yeah, during that 30 days, it definitely was like being on an Animal Planet show. You know the things, the like documentaries of the penguins, and they're like in the big huddle. Like, it's so dang cold. You've got like this platoon of Marines all trying to stay warm, and it's literally like one of those huddles. It would rotate in because like a lot of it was just hurry up and wait. Like, you're sitting at the range to shoot, the 50s or the 240s or 249s, whatever it was, grenade launcher. And when it wasn't your turn, you're like sitting over there, and we're all just huddled up, just like rotating in, rotating out. You're just like, I want it to be my turn to be in the middle. It was so terrible.
Yeah, when I went through SEER school, we discovered you can fit 4 people underneath a poncho liner.
Oh.
4.
Speaking of that, one thing I learned in boot camp, you can fit 16 people in a urinal and effectively pee at the same time.
That is impressive.
That was our record. Yeah. It was one of those, like there's like 5 or 6 porta potties here, and you've got 88 guys that got to go, and your drill instructor's counting down the whole time, and so you're start shoving guys in there, and then it kind of just became a challenge. How many could we fit? And the drill instructors kind of went with it. They're like, so we effectively had at one time 16 guys, and they're effectively peeing at the same time. I don't know how we made it happen, but we Houdini'd it.
It's the Marine clown car.
Can you imagine? You're just like walking by and you don't know that there's 16 Marines in there, and all of a sudden here comes 16 Marines running out of the head at the same time.
You got to hear the wacky sax music is playing in the background.
There's always room for one more.
Okay, so let's jump forward just a little bit. So you wanted to be an aviator.
Yeah.
You ended up being aviation adjacent. So what was your MOS?
So I was a 6116, which is a flight line mechanic on Ospreys.
Okay.
Which is pretty cool.
Is that what you wanted to do?
No.
Okay.
So actually, that's one of my biggest regrets in life. And to be honest, I held it against my parents for a long time. Not anymore. Originally, I wanted to be infantry. I had an infantry contract. I scored a 97 on my ASVAB, which is pretty high. My parents did not like that. Basically told, no son of ours is going to be a bullet sponge. Yeah. And that's what I wanted to do. And so, like I said, that's like one of those big regrets, is like, that's what I wanted to do. That's was a big thing for me. So it built a lot of resentment, and kind of caused a lot of my struggle, with my service. I wasn't doing what I wanted to do, and I had an infantry contract, so I had the job that I wanted, and I gave it up because I was kind of given an ultimatum on it. Also, my recruiter was like, bro, like, you scored really high on your ASVAB. Why would you want to do the job that anybody that can barely qualify can do, So, yeah, it wasn't what I wanted to do. I kind of rationalized it. I was like, well, those guys can't do their job if I don't do my job. That's kind of how I made it through the days. But I wasn't happy with what...
And Ospreys always need help.
Oh yeah, so statistic for you, or at least it was when I was in, is statistically for every one flight hour, it needed 19 maintenance hours.
Ospreys are ridiculous. I say this as the Army guy. Ospreys are ridiculous.
That is wild. That's a lot of maintenance.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So paint a picture for you. We would stay there until like 9 or 10 o'clock at night on Friday, making sure that all the birds were up because they had an op on Monday. They didn't move all weekend. You come in Monday and several of them would be down for whatever reason. I'm like, I spent 12 hours on Friday working on this bird. It hasn't even moved, and now it's broke. Yeah. So
I don't
kind of ridiculous.
I don't care for them. and you've obviously have more blood, sweat, and tears in that than me. I got offered to fly on one time, and I said no, just no, thank you.
Oh, I've flown on them a few times, and I loved it. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And I mean, it's got a bad rap, but statistically, Blackhawks crash more often than Ospreys do.
Tell everybody what an Osprey is and how it flies, because not everybody knows.
Okay, so I imagine y'all will probably throw a picture of one up there. So an Osprey is a tilt rotor aircraft. It takes off like a helicopter, and then in flight, the props transition down, and it flies like a airplane,
like a rotor.
Yeah, and it's got massive props. So when it is in airplane mode, there's maybe a foot and a half space difference between where the rotors go and the side of the aircraft. Just so you guys can imagine, and it's got pretty long nacelles, or not nacelles, wings that hold the nacelles. The nacelles are the engines. And yeah, it's pretty cool.
But it can take off and land in a helicopter type configuration, which makes it handy for the Navy and the Marine Corps because of the maritime implications.
It's a very cool concept.
I mean,
but I think there's a reason why there's only one.
I mean,
and why it hasn't been duplicated by everybody else.
Well, the Army's working on something. We're supposed to be working on their own VSTOL. So VSTOL is vertical short takeoff and landing. So it's a VSTOL aircraft. I mean, the Army's supposed to be working on one that's similar, and I'm like, yeah, it's going to take a long time.
Should we talk about other projects that the Army has started and never finished?
I'm sure there's a lot of them.
All right, you got done with your training to be the Osprey mechanic, and where did you wind up?
I winded up in San Diego, which is funny because I wanted to stay here in North Carolina because my parents are on this coast. There was only 2 of us that wanted to stay in North Carolina. Everybody else wanted to go to San Diego. But everybody that wanted to...
Just to spite you.
Yeah. And like, so the 2 people that ended up here still wanted to go to San Diego, and 2 of us that wanted to stay there or stay here ended up, they're like, no. I was like, can't we just swap? Like you got...
Out of that group of people that you're talking about, they were all, freshly graduated Osprey mechanics.
Yeah. It was like a no, you can't have what you want kind of thing. I was like, okay, like me and Davis want to stay here. The 2 guys that are staying here want to go there. Why can't we just swap? But I mean, it ended up being good. Yeah. Probably liked it better out there. I learned how to surf. So.
The surfing in San Diego is better than
here,
and then Wilmington or whatever. So yeah.
Plus, you're a lot closer to. Well, I guess not really. I always forget how close Jacksonville is to the beach. So I guess you're not that far from the beach, but yeah.
Okay, so you show up to a aviation unit.
Yeah,
with one peer from your cohort.
So I think there was 10 guys in our platoon, and 7 or 8 of us went to San Diego.
Oh, more than okay.
So one of the cool things is. So one of the guys that went to San Diego went to the same unit. His name's Hamilton, one of my best friends, also from Arkansas, which is kind of why we became best friends. Ironically, hated each other at first. Like I said, mentioned earlier, most of my best friends in the military, we fought. Him and I had a whole 3-hour battle in our barracks room. I don't remember what it was about, but we didn't see eye to eye. And we laid the ground rules. Hey, nothing that's visible. And we went at it for about 3 hours before I finally got him in a chokehold and it was about to be lights out. Then his roommate, who's been sitting there watching TV the whole time, comes over, puts me in a chokehold. He's like, I think he's done. And then next day in formation, we're standing next to each other. And they kind of looked at each other. We're like, so we good? He's like, yeah, we're good. And after that, best friends.
Yeah.
But he ended up going to the same squadron as me.
I've had a similar experience with the person who will be unnamed. And getting that out was the best thing that happened to us. So.
Yeah, me and Hamilton were almost inseparable after that. We were best friends. Another cool thing was one of the guys that went to another platoon, or not another platoon, another squadron, Davis. He was in my boot camp platoon. He went through MCT with me. He went through the schoolhouse with me, and then he was stationed right next door. Ironically, I did not like David, and he already knows this, so I don't mind saying it out loud. I did not like Davis in boot camp. He was that guy that got us in trouble, but he was also that guy that he wasn't doing it because he needed to. He was doing it because he was like, I kind of want to serve. So he didn't really give a crap in boot camp. Ended up, again, he was fantastic mechanic, great friend. After boot camp, I was like, yeah, I like this guy. This guy's pretty dang cool. But in boot camp, he was always the one that we were getting in trouble because of Davis. It was Davis. It was either Davis or Smith. And I was like, dang it, Davis, dude. And then afterwards, I was like, oh, I like this guy. He's pretty cool.
So what was it like being a West Coast Marine?
I'm always
Hollywood
will be a
Marine.
I will always be a parasailing Marine. I don't know anything about being a Hollywood Marine, but living in San Diego was it was cool. A lot of, like I said, a lot of great surfing. Weather's nice most of the time. I will say there was the one time that I thought we were gonna have to evacuate because you could see the fires. Literally could see the fires. They were that close. And they're like, business as usual, That was interesting. I mean, there was guys having to go home to check on their houses and stuff because of where the fires were. But
Forest fires?
Yeah. Well, not forest, but wildfire.
Wildfires, yeah.
Yeah, literally, on maybe 5 miles away, there's a kind of mountain, and it was coming over the mountain. You could see the smoke, you could see the flames. They acted like it was nothing was unusual. They're like, well, until it gets to the gate, you keep turning wrenches. So,
I mean, as we're recording this, we're several weeks removed from the big LA fires that happened, and the bottom line is that region of California has been experiencing these types of fires forever. Now, there is a responsible and smart way to go about managing that at the policy level, which we're not going to get into here. But that said, I mean, it's desert.
Yeah. Those fires are nothing new. They've been there.
I mean, the Native Americans knew all about it, and they learned how to live with it too.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'd maybe been there a few months. So it was my first time experiencing wildfire. So I was like, whoa, what? And they're just like,
just kind of
business as usual. And you're like, okay, all right.
Earthquakes and fires.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's paradise.
Pretty well.
Okay, so you're turning wrenches on these aircraft that we've already discussed. So tell us about the dynamic of being now you're in an actual unit. So you've got a first line supervisor, you've got peers, you've got commanders you're dealing with. This is really your kind of first foray into being in a real unit. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I got there, and our flight line shop is, roughly 100 guys. You got day crew and night crew, which that's a lot of guys, and just our shop. And I think airframes had a similar number. Avi maybe slightly smaller. Yeah, you have all your different, departments. So your big three are flight line, airframes, avionics, or AVI as we called it. You've got ordnance, you've got flight E. Those are like small shops. Pretty much the only purpose for ordnance was the machine guns. That's the only like ordnance we have
for that airframe.
Is 50s or 240s for on the ramp.
Got it.
We only have ramp guns. Now, closer to when I got out, they started putting the belly guns on there, which were pretty cool. So I guess they started to get more of a role. Oh, dude, those things
they're awesome.
Cool. Like literally, it looks like looked like a Xbox controller and this little screen. You know, the crew chief just sits there and uses the
video game.
Joystick. It's literally like playing a video game.
The military figured out we're going to leverage a generation of young men and women who grew up playing nothing but video games. Now we're going to make them efficient killing machines.
Call of Duty in real life. Yeah. I mean, it was very interesting to get to my unit, though. They were a week and a half back from Afghanistan. So, like I mentioned, I enlisted because I wanted to go to Afghanistan.
You missed the wave.
I missed the wave. They had just came back, and I was like, dang, I'm probably not going to get to go to Afghanistan. And, again, you're that new guy. And everybody that's there has just spent, 6-8 months on a deployment together.
Yeah.
And now you're that new guy.
You're the FNG.
Yeah, you're the FNG. And you don't know nothing about the aircraft. Literally, I don't know why my MOS school was 3 months, because I didn't really learn anything other than this is a nacelle, this is the fuel cell, and like just basic nomenclature. I didn't learn anything about fixing an aircraft. And literally our instructors, like, pretty much everything you learn here, like, you're going to learn everything on the job.
You'll learn once you get there.
Yeah.
You're not the first person to tell us that.
Yeah, and so you're like, you get there, I don't know nothing. Again, I didn't take any leave. I went straight out because I was like, hey, I'm going to get ahead of my peers. All the rest of them took leave after MOS school. So I got there by myself. I'm that new guy. All these guys are salty vets, and some of them actually saw combat. Like a couple of our crew chiefs got awarded Purple Hearts for getting shot up. A bunch of the Battle of Bastion, where the Taliban attacked the airfield. Mm-hmm. My unit was there, so a lot of these guys were directly involved with that. Some of them got awards for valor for that, for their involvement in it. So these guys are salty, and they're like so close, and you're this outside person. You're like, dang, like it was kind of rough. Nobody kind of wanted anything to do with you, and you're like, dang, this sucks. And then there's also that realization of, I missed my chance to go to Afghanistan. So I'm already kind of like, well,
you are how long into how long of a enlistment? Just so we can get our timelines here.
So boot camp's 3 months. You got about 2 months to get through combat training. So a month of combat training and a month of waiting beforehand. About 3 months of MOS school, so about 8 months
into how long?
5 year.
A 5 year contract.
Yeah.
That's a long contract.
Well, yeah, because so another thing is I got lucky. Most MOS aviation MOSs have to go through Pensacola. And Pensacola at that time, I don't know if it's still this way, but it was so backlogged that, let's just say, guys I graduated combat training with that went to Pensacola, they showed up at my unit after I'd been there for like a year.
Wow.
Yeah, and
this is they were still going to like that same 3 month school.
So for some reason, flight line mechanics didn't have to go to Pensacola. We went straight to New River. So literally it was a 5-minute taxi ride from Camp Geiger to New River. We were the only MOS that didn't have to do that. Didn't have to go to Pensacola. But everybody down there, you know, they were sitting in limbo for almost a year, and like their MOS school wasn't even that long. It's just for some reason Pensacola was so backed up. I don't know if it still is or if they figured that out, but like guys were getting there like a year. I was like, oh, dude, I haven't seen you in a long ass time, you know?
Interesting. I guess I have thoughts about that maybe we can discuss off camera. Okay, so you're 8 months into a 5-year contract.
Yeah, well, it's supposed to be a 5-year contract.
Yeah, got it. So go ahead.
Yeah, so still new to the Marine Corps. Still, you know, you're new to this unit. Don't know shit about the aircraft. You get the crappy jobs, you know, at first, and you know the salty lance corporals are very happy that you're there as a PFC.
You're the low man on the totem pole.
Yeah,
FNG.
Yup, and so you get all the. Luckily, though, there was a couple guys. A lot of them were kind of standoffish, but there was a couple guys that were good dudes. This one guy, King, he was a lance corporal at the time. Like a 4-year lance. That's the other thing about that MOS is it's so backlogged.
Stagnation.
Promotions, yeah.
Yeah. Like 4-year lances is a normal thing.
It's normal.
And the only reason guys would get promoted right before they got out was because like the Marine Corps has some kind of like policy about like if you don't pick up corporal at you know, if you've done the things and you haven't picked up corporal by the time you get out, like there's some kind of like stipulation or something. So they'll promote people right before they get out to corporal just to keep from having to compensate them.
It's a shell game. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, a lot of these guys are 4-year lances. So E3, which PFC in the Army. Our E4 mafia, the lance corporals, that doesn't exist.
Right.
So like these dudes are all salty, been doing it for a long time. But like King was a good one. He kind of took me under his wing. He was this kind of quiet African American guy.
Yep.
Kind of took me under his wing and was chill. There was there was a couple other lance corporals, like I guess kind of remembered what it was like to be that new guy at some point, and we're cool, but like the sergeants and corporals and stuff, they're just kind of like, get out of here, they're like, get out of, you're not worthy to be in my presence. And they're like, especially if, I'm sure it's probably just that game, hey, you're the new guy, but also too them coming back, you're like, dang dude, like I don't feel like I'm a part of this team from the beginning. Granted, by the time like my peers got there, like Hamilton and one of the other guys, I'd already been there for 3-4 weeks, and then I was no longer the
new guy.
I wasn't the new guy, and I already knew how to do all the shit jobs, So guess who got to do that stuff more? They did, for a bit.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you talked earlier about the different shops and everything, how many mechanics were you assigned to a specific Osprey, or were you were just one mechanic for a squadron of Ospreys, or how did that work?
So we had 13 or 14 birds. And you pretty much worked on anyone.
Okay.
Your
mechanic section was assigned to X amount of aircraft.
Oh no, so the way it works is like every shop is responsible for all the aircraft. Now you do have like a plane captain who is responsible for that one bird.
Right.
But everybody else is, if they're like, say 00 needs to fly, go make sure it's ready. You check all the stuff, fuel samples. You did everything. Whatever bird needed worked on. and I guess a little bit more about what a flight line mechanic's job actually is, we're the jack of all trades. We do a little bit of everything, master of none.
Just make it happen.
We're not supposed to do any airframe stuff, so any of like the panels or any of that, I'm not waiting. We're not waiting on airframes to come out here and remove this panel. We're going to take the panel off. We're going to do it. We're not supposed to unhook any avionics. We're going to unhook that, and because I'm not waiting on Avi to take their time to get out here so that I can do my job. So we did a little bit of everything, but our main job was engines, fuel systems, all the kind of interior systems, fueling the aircraft, taxiing and recovering aircraft, which was one of my favorite parts of the job is taxiing aircraft out. I love doing that. Anything to do with the fuel systems, that was us. Nice thing is, when I was in, I don't know if it's still true, but when I was in, most of the engines were under warranty still. So if there was an engine problem, you just had to drop the engine and then Rolls-Royce, send it back to Rolls-Royce and let them fix it, depending on what it was. So didn't do there was little things you changed on the engines, but not any major engine work we didn't do. It got shipped off to someone else and they handled it. So
I'm just curious, where's the Rolls repair shop / factory? I mean,
depending on what it is,
I would assume it would be overseas.
Depending on what it was, it would just go. We had like a hangar nearby that was like a phase hangar, so they go through maintenances. There's like, it's been so long, I can't remember. There's like a 90-hour maintenance, like 180-hour maintenance, different phases.
Sure.
And depending on where it's at in that phase, is what maintenance needs to be done. So sometimes a bird might be down for 6 to 8 months because it's on that heavy maintenance cycle. But, they had a whole shop, and it was like bell bowing guys that they had like their own team of guys, usually guys that were former mechanics, now working on the civilian side for much more pay.
Yes,
that's how that works.
Better hours and better pay.
Yeah. So we had like the phase shop and a lot of times it would just go over there, and then these guys would work on it a lot. I think if it was something more sophisticated, then it got shipped off to like the higher levels, like depot level, and then
right
on its way.
The depots, that's the heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go ahead and take a quick break. We'll come back.
So you talked about how guys came in a few weeks after you had already been there, and how now they were the lowest person on the pecking order. But how long did it take for you to feel fully integrated into the unit? Because, these guys just got back from the deployment and everything, so, they have their own sort of mindset, click, whatever. But how long did it take before you were like, all right, these are my guys now?
I would say, it probably took a couple months to really feel. You got to earn their trust. Like, again, like this is a tight knit group, and you got to earn your trust. You got to put in your work to really feel completely accepted. So I'd say maybe 2 to 3 months. It took a minute. Even then, it was okay. So how I am is I'm going to give 110%. Like, I'm going to give my very best day in, day out. Now, granted, sometimes 110% looks different because one day is 110 might not be the next day's. I dealt with a lot of, I don't know, I ended up resonating more with my NCOs and higher ups than I did most of my peers. I had my friends in there, but
did that create resentment?
Oh yeah. I think it goes both ways, like resentment from my peers and resentment towards some of my peers. So like I mentioned, when it started out, you got all the jobs, like all the jobs nobody wants to do because you're the new guy, so they don't have to do it anymore. Well, even though there was guys way newer than I was, I still had to do all that stuff. And, all my peers were like, yeah, it's because you're a bag. And, you kind of get to the point where you start to believe it, right? Like, I was the one doing fuel samples every day. I was the one doing all the stuff that nobody wants to do. But again, like the way I am is, hey, Parker, fuel samples. Go do fuel samples. Come back. Hey, Sergeant, I finished that. What else? They give me the next job. Do that, come back. Hey, what else you got? And, I would just, all day, I'm like, hey, what's next? What's next?
Yeah.
What's next? And meanwhile, the other guys are doing the fun stuff or the more interesting stuff while I'm doing all the mundane, nobody wants to do these tasks. But I was just like, hey, it's my job. I'm going to do it. And I think, yeah, and again, like all my peers were like, yeah, it's because you're a Marine, and I'm like, maybe I am, and like they're all doing the things to get promoted, which I didn't do.
Like
I was like
schools and stuff like
yeah,
that.
like the MCIs. So like the online classes, they're doing the different things to get promoted. I'm just like, I want to be the best at my job. Which I never understood why I needed to take these classes that don't relate anything to what I do to get promoted. It should be based on how well I do my specific job. But I was like, I'm going to be the best mechanic here. I'm going to be the most qualified mechanic here. But yeah, there was that resentment. There wasn't a whole lot of dudes that I actually talked to that were my peers. There was a few. But I think, for a lot of the reasons that we've already talked about that kind of caused some conflict within me and like that resentment of not doing what I wanted to do. And then now here all my peers think I'm this bad Marine. It started to weigh on me. And I think my sergeants realized, hey, like Parker, there's something off with Parker. And I remember one day my desk sergeants pulled me out and they're like, Parker, you know why you get all these jobs? I was like, because I'm a and they're like, no. You get all those jobs because we can give them to you. You get them done.
They'll get done.
You get done. You don't complain about it, and you immediately come back and ask for more. They're like, you're the person we know we can rely on to get stuff done. Yeah. They get these other jobs because they bitch and complain. Sorry, they moan if they don't get the good jobs. They're like, oh, I got to do this. You just do it, and then you come back for more. So I that kind of helped, but I think I was already like kind of in a bad downhill like spiral at that point. Also, it was probably about maybe 6 months into being there. We got told we were picked to go to Afghanistan. And, all the guys that have already been are like, yeah, we're going back. And us new guys are like, cool, like we got to go. And then they pulled it and gave it to another unit. So then I was like, dang, I really am not going to. So then there's that too. It's like, dang, I'm like, I'm never going to get a deploy, to the point that I was talking to the career planner about how to get the heck out of there, I was looking into, going Raiders. Well, I think at the time it was still MARSOC, but MARSOC, they were about to host tryouts. And so I'd already done training for that with one of my sergeants before, one of my recruiters, and I knew I could pass it. So I was looking into that. I was also looking into going to college so I could become an aviator, because you can go to the Naval Academy as active duty. And so I was like exploring my options, and I was like, I want to go do something that actually gives me that fulfillment, whether it's flying or if it's being boots on the ground somewhere.
Anywhere but here.
Anywhere but here, pretty much, yeah. And I don't know, I just didn't feel like I fit in there. I had friends, but I also still felt like this isn't it. You
weren't achieving your potential.
Yeah, exactly. And that was something that took me a long time to grasp, which, as we share more, like, you'll see, I kind of fell into a really, really bad place. And it took me a long time to come out of that. Like, I had a lot of resentment towards myself, towards my family, everything, about how I didn't do it. Ultimately, I ended up, like, hey, like, maybe that wasn't what. Yeah, it was like, it's more of a learning lesson, right? Like, now I do whatever my heart tells me to do. Like, I'm not gonna let somebody talk me out of it, because you don't know what my purpose is. You don't know it won't make sense to you. But if that's what I'm supposed to do, that's what I'm supposed to do. So I've kind of learned to, like, obviously people can give feedback. I take feedback, right? But I'm not gonna let you tell me I can't do this or not to do that. And also, had a lot of, I have to prove myself too, was a lot of what my stuff was.
Which is common for young men.
Yeah, it's a lot of childhood stuff though. Like, based on my biological father and the way my dad was. Very much one of those guys that, he was proud of me, he loved me, but he didn't say it a whole lot. And as a kid, already got some stuff going on. I could have used hearing, "Hey, I'm proud of you," a little bit more. But, I had to find validation through, I had to prove myself, is what I dealt with a lot. Now I don't need to prove myself to anybody. I know who I am. I don't care what you think of me, But back then I really had to prove myself. And so that's why I was like, I have to be the best. I have to do this. I got to push myself. Because I wasn't happy with who I was, is what I found out. But, so there was just like this real like darkness there that I didn't know how to shake. Was in a really bad place. Had a real drinking problem.
Mm-hmm. If you don't mind me asking, where were you on your faith journey during that period? If at all.
So, I mean, everybody goes to church and boot camp, But after I got to the unit, I hardly went to church. I went a couple times. It sucked because I worked night shifts. Yeah. And so it was hard for me to get to church. So I fell out of it. My faith kind of went down the drain. So I was in a bad place in my faith at that point too, which basically everything was kind of in the drain and in that area. I started going to this group down near North Island. I can't remember what it was called, but it was most of the people there were like veterans or active duty. Great group of guys and girls, and I started going to that every week, which was feeding into me. But at that point, for my military career at least, like, we'd already kind of burned bridges, So.
Okay. So go ahead, Dan.
Oh no, go.
So you're in a bad place.
Yeah.
Your NCOs have noticed, presumably some of the officers. I don't know how much officer interaction you're having at this point, but your leaders are starting to notice.
Yeah.
You are keenly aware of it. So where does this path take you?
So like I said, I was drinking a lot, and mind you, I was only like 19, maybe 20 around that point. And it was bad. It was started taking a toll on my work, which is why, they noticed, hey, Michael went from being this dude we can depend on to, or Parker went from being this Marine we can depend on to, what the heck's going on, which I feel like there should have been more red flags going off in people's head. Like, you don't just go from being, that dependable
top
Marine
performer to substandard.
Yeah, for sure.
And by the time I think anyone noticed, it was pretty well bad. But I was coping with with what was going on with lots of alcohol and sex. Like, that's how I dealt with it. I just kind of tried to fill the void with the two, and obviously neither one of those is gratifying long term. A temporary fix to a deep problem, but that's kind of where I got myself into some precarious situations because of that. Kind of had a weekend thing with someone that was in the Navy, and things got interesting. I won't talk a lot about it because I don't like talking bad about people at all. It just was kind of a bad situation.
Mistakes were made.
She ended up being pregnant. Still not sure to this day if it's mine or not. Again, keep it to a minimum. Moved in with her, was really struggling. Then my command stepped in because she lived down near Coronado, and so I was commuting every day. I wasn't sleeping well. I was medicating with alcohol and stuff like that. I was in a really bad place. Actually, in fact, I was drinking and driving one day, and luckily I wrecked like a block from my house, and she helped me get the car back to the house. Like, that's how bad it was. People don't know that because the law enforcement didn't get involved, and but I was very close to getting in trouble for that. Like, I was in a really dark place. Like, now that I'm like really thinking about it, I was like, wow, like I didn't realize how bad of a place I was at that point. But like, my command stepped in, and I was in financial problems too. And so they made me move back into the barracks. And that's when things went really bad. She accused me of, sexual assault.
The woman that you had been living with?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess it was kind of a spite thing. And then military doesn't take too kindly to that, So immediately threw me in the brig. That was rough. There's something about, like, when, again, like, I've been in troubles since, like, and you get a sentence and you know how long you're there. I was in there on pre-trial, so
which
every
is
day,
kind of purgatory, right?
Yeah. It was like every day you wake up not knowing how long you're going to be in there. And it's like, am I going to be convicted of this? Am I not? And mind you, I was coping with sex and alcohol. So when they went through my phone, they found text messages to a prostitute, which was a charge that was added. That's kind of where I found my faith again. My grandparents sent me a study Bible that I read every day. But it was crazy because it was like the worst situation you could be in, right? Like, there's a chance I can be convicted of this that I didn't do. You're seeing other people with similar cases, that are getting years, and you're like, dude, like, how screwed am I?
That's rough company, right?
Yeah. And people are like, oh, dude, you're screwed. But it was interesting because, like, the Lord was like telling me, like, hey, you're gonna be all right. Like, you're gonna walk out of here. And I hung to that, even though you're watching other guys go down for other lot less stuff, and I'm like, some days I was like, am I actually gonna be okay? But I was like, no. All right, if that's what God is saying, then I'll stick to it. I was in there for 9 months exactly.
For pre-trial.
Man,
that is a long hitch. Oof.
Yeah, it was. There was a lot of stuff going on the outside as well, but that I didn't know. Being in there.
How could you, right?
Yeah. And yeah, I was like, man, I knew, regardless of what happened, I was like, my career's pretty much over. Also, I think given the opportunity, if I could have stayed, I wouldn't have. And it was this. What I found out later is I didn't get any visitors while I was there. None of my friends came to see me. My only interaction with the outside was my command when they came to visit, and most of them, all but one of them, like the staff NCOs or officers that would come, they looked at me with complete disgust, like I was this monster.
You were guilty.
Yeah. Yeah, there was no innocent until proven guilty. I was guilty, and I was a disgrace. And they treated me as such, pretty bad. And, so none of my friends are coming to see me either. So my impression is everybody outside these walls thinks I'm this terrible monster. And I'm this piece of fill in the blank.
Gotcha.
And so I was like, man, I don't even know what I'm going to do when I get out of here. If I get out of here, I will say there was one staff sergeant, and I think he came to see me 3 times in that whole period. And those were the best visits of my time there. Staff Sergeant Perrin was his name. I don't know where he is these days, but I think about that man a lot and how he got me through some of that. He was the only one that would come in, and he would sit down, and he would actually talk to me like I'm a normal person. And I enjoyed that. It was like, wow, somebody that values me as a person and doesn't, look at me like I'm this monster. So ultimately, some things came out, and it was literally 9 months to the day later. They come in and they say, Parker, your attorneys are here to see you. And I walk in and they said, go ahead and start packing your stuff. The 120 charge is dropped. There was some information that it came out, and so they dropped that. So that dropped me down to an admin sep versus a court martial. I ended up taking a deal. Again, like I said, I didn't want to be in the Marine Corps anymore. Probably shouldn't have, but I was young and naive.
I mean, were you getting good legal counsel on this, or?
Yeah, for the most part, like my 2 attorneys were on point. My attorneys at the beginning, so the one who stuck with me the whole time, he was good. The other one didn't seem like he was very vested, but he ended up, again, I think there's some divine intervention there. He ended up transferring to a different, base. He was like, well, I can stay on as your counsel, or we can get you new. And I was like, I'll take a new counsel. So they brought in this female. I can't remember her name. I could see her face. And she walked in and she said, you're not guilty and you're not going down for this crap. And I was like, I like you.
You're right.
I was like, I like you. Her and the other attorney, that I was like, I feel confident with these 2.
That's what you want to hear, right?
Yeah, I feel confident with these 2 that I might actually be all right. They suggested that I take the deal because the way they explained it is, court martial, it's beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
At an admin sep board, it's preponderance of the evidence. He might have done it, he might not have. We're going to lean towards he did, and I could get in trouble. And they said, and I don't know if it was true or not, but they said, kind of what I've heard now is that might have been bad advice. I think they were just trying to get me to take something. So
they can save face.
I think so.
It's a more expedient process too.
So they were like, hey, they said that the 120 stuff could come back into play at that, which I've kind of found out that would be double jeopardy. I feel like, I don't know. So I feel like that was kind of some misleading advice that they gave. So based on that, I was like, well, I don't have anything, that's going to stick with me right now. So, and also I don't want to be here, so I'll take the deal. And my conditions were, again, I was young and naive, and I didn't realize that there's more that impacts re-enlistment than just a discharge. I was like, well, I want a discharge that allows me to go into another branch, because I was like, I'll go to the Army, I'll do my 4 years, and I'll do it right. I didn't realize that there's things like separation codes and re-enlistment codes, and I wasn't very specific. So they gave me exactly what I asked for. They just screwed me in other ways. So I couldn't go into another branch, which, I'm fine with that now at this point. But I was kind of upset about that when I got out. I was like, well, dang. But yeah, so, since it got dropped down, they had to come get me out of the brig that day. Even that was pretty.
Who's they?
My command. So my command had to come pick me up.
The very NCOs who would not come to visit you now have to come pick you up.
Oh yeah, and it was kind of messed up. So they waited until the end of the day, and mind you, this is a Friday. They came and picked me up. It was probably about like 5:30, 6 p.m. All my stuff is at SIF, and in a locker stored up. So I have none of my personal belongings. My CAT card, my bank cards, all of that stuff are at the brig. Those people are gone by the time my command comes to get me. So they released me from the brig with no meal card, no ID, no debit card, nothing. I can't get any of my other stuff from storage until Monday. And they take me to my barracks. And I was like, well, how am I supposed to figure it out? They didn't want to just do anything. Luckily, my mom and dad were like, yeah, no, y'all are going to do something about this or it's going to be a bad day. And I think the staff sergeant bought me 2 microwavable meals. And that was it, to go the whole weekend. I was like, I've lived off less, but really? I would say that's, in that moment, one of those moments that kind of sticks with me from my whole Marine Corps career, though, is what happened after that. I get to my barracks, the same room that I had before, and I was standing on the balcony. And mind you, my impression up to this point is everybody at my command hates me. They all think I'm this piece of and I'm standing up there in my uniforms, and there's nothing in the world I want to do other than take off these freaking Marine Corps uniforms that I used to love so much, because I have worn them every day for the last 9 months. I haven't got to put on regular clothes. I'm like, I just want to feel like a normal person. And I can't, because I have nothing but uniforms. And, I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, kind of enjoying the freedoms, but I'm kind of also, well, what do I do? I don't know what to do. I don't have my vehicle. I don't have this. I don't have anything. And here comes Diddy bopping around the corner. One of my friends, he was a Lance Corporal at the time, Lance Corporal Barron. He comes Diddy bopping around the corner, his cheerful and usual self. And he looks up, and I was on the third deck, and he goes, Parker? So excited to see me, dude. Genuinely excited. And I think that threw me off guard, And he comes running up the stairs, literally hugs me, and it's like, dude, it's so good to see you. And I'm confused.
You've been locked up for 9 months and he didn't come to see you.
Yeah. I was like, you're excited to see me? What? And, I was kind of very, humble and humiliated, I was like, hey, can I ask a favor? I was like, do you have a pair of, shorts that I can borrow? I was like, I just want to get out of these freaking uniforms. He's like, yeah, come with me. And so I go back to his barracks where 3 of our other friends are waiting for him, all excited to see me. And I'm so confused. I don't even know how to ask at the time. He's like, here's a t-shirt, here's some shorts, here's some shoes too. And he's like, hey, we're all about to go out to dinner. Come with us. I was like, I can't. They're like, why? I was like, I don't have an ID card, so I can't get back on base. They're like, oh, we'll get you back on. Don't worry about it. And I was like, well, I don't have any money. And they're like, we got you. And so I was like, okay. So I went out with them, and it was kind of while we were sitting there, and they were like all so happy to see me, and I couldn't hold it anymore. I was like, you know, I thought you guys hated me. And they're like, what? No. And they're like, basically like, you got shafted. Like, we all got shafted. Most of them had gotten an NJP too while I was gone, which is non-judicial punishment for those that don't know. And they're like, you just got shafted harder than the rest of us. Found out a couple of my other buddies had gotten kicked out for dumb stuff, you know, in the meantime. And I was like, well, then why didn't y'all... And that's where the real, like, betrayal kind of set in. Because then I asked, you know, well, why didn't y'all come see me, you know? Like, I was in there for 9 months, and y'all never came to see me once. And they're like, we were told you weren't allowed to have visitors. And that's when I realized, you know, my command had been lying to everybody. So then there was definitely a deep disgust for my command and dislike for them. But, you know, it was like, oh, they were happy to see me. And so that was a pleasant surprise. That's also like kind of one of those stories that hangs true to me, because ultimately my unit was actually working up. They got cut orders while I was in there, or right before I went to the brig, we got cut orders for a MEU. So shortly after I got out, they went on a MEU, which for those of you that aren't familiar with Marine Corps, Marine Expeditionary Unit, that's when the Marines go out on boats. They got cut orders to the 15th MEU. I came back out and said goodbye to them before they left. They left, and my other buddy I talked about, Davis, his unit was coming back from Afghanistan about the same time. So I went out to California to welcome him back and to send my buddies off. 2 weeks later, one of our birds went down in Hawaii, and Josh was on that plane.
I remember when that happened.
Yeah,
I sure do.
I remember it too. The crazy thing is, it was one of those. The day didn't seem to fit. You know what happened. You know, it was a beautiful day, gorgeous. You're in a great mood. You're like, how could anything be wrong with the day? And then walked into my grandpa's house, and he's like, did you hear about that Osprey that crashed in Hawaii? And at that point, we didn't have Ospreys in Hawaii, so I already kind of knew. And I was like, oh, yeah, that was kind of rough.
Yeah.
And kind of sucked, because I was like, dang, like, I'm here by myself. And I found out before the families did, because, friends.
The network.
Yeah.
And that was one of those hard ones, because you're like, who was it? And you're running through every crew chief, because I knew as soon as they said there was one killed, I was like, it was a crew chief. It's somebody I know. And you're running through the list, and you're like, who was it? And you're like, I can't put any name in there, you know, like, you're like, I hope it wasn't this person. And you're like, what are you talking about? You know, like, I hope it wasn't any of them, but I know it is, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So once you were out from the brig, back with your unit, how long did the separation take?
So that was November 17th. I got out, or October 17th. I got out December 1st, 2015. So about a month and a half.
Yeah. So that is pretty quick.
Yeah.
That is pretty quick. And once you were separated, how long had you, or what year was it, and how long had you spent in total time in service?
I think it's like, I don't know. I feel like I always round up to 2.5 years. But I think it was slightly under that, like 2 years, 5 months, something like that. I don't remember exactly.
So that would have been 2015?
December 2014. Yeah. December 1st, 2014.
So.
I always round up, not because I like to lie, like I'm trying to lie it, but I don't always feel like explaining the story. So I'll tell people 3 years, especially if they're not military, because then they don't tend to ask questions.
It keeps the conversation short.
Yeah. So if y'all ever hear me like say like, oh, I was in 3 years, it's not because I'm trying to lie about it. I don't want to answer questions, but I do that a lot.
You don't want to talk about all the stuff that we're making him talk about right now.
Yeah, exactly. So if you ever hear me say, I feel like it was
Just
like
refer
2
them
years
back
and
to
5
this
months.
podcast.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be like, go listen to one of the podcasts I've done. This one, and like, I'm not trying to hide anything. Just this one. Just this one. Listen to just this one.
So, how long did it take once you were separated to, I guess, course correct?
Way too long. So again, I left with a very bitter taste in my mouth. It was very quick, you know. I didn't want anything to do with the Marine Corps. I lied about being a Marine for probably the next year or so, until it almost got me into quite a few fights because I have Marine Corps tattoos. And you know how us Marines are. You don't wear our Eagle Globe and Anchor. You don't brand yourself as Marine if you're not a Marine. That's a good way to get beat.
Are you telling me there's some pride there?
There's definitely some pride there. And so, you know, people be like, "Oh, you're a Marine." I was like, "No." And then they, you know, get all mad and be like, "Okay, yeah, I was in the Marines. I was a Marine." And then for the longest time, I hated the expression "once a Marine, always a Marine" because it pissed me off because I didn't want anything to do with that chapter of my life. But again, like I said, you know, the stuff with Josh right after, and you know, feeling like I should have been there with them, and you know, all that kind of guilt and shame. And something else I didn't mention is in that period between when I got out of the brig and when I was discharged, you would have thought that with the alcohol playing into why I got in, I would have not drank, but I dove right back into the alcohol.
That's not how sin works.
Yeah. Well, I found myself in a situation where I was drinking with one of the guys from that church group that I was going to with his roommate who was in the Navy, and some things happened that while I was incapacitated. So it's kind of interesting how that script flipped from I was being accused of this to now that. And again, I didn't report because one, I'm a Marine.
Right.
I'm supposed to be tough. I shouldn't have allowed myself to get into that. Also, too, I felt like if I said something, they were going to focus on the fact that I was drinking and I wasn't 21 yet, even though it was like a month until I turned 21. And also it was like, who's going to, like, these are the thoughts that I rationalized not saying anything is, you know, like, also, like, you were just accused of that. Nobody's going to believe that it happened to you kind of thing. So, you know, I just kind of dealt with it in silence. And then, yeah, like you said, how long did it take to course correct? A long time. Like, I feel like for every veteran, there's that struggle when you get out, that separation, you know, that transition is difficult. You lost your friends, you lost, you know, that sense of purpose, and you go back home and, you know, your family and everybody's used to living without you. So you kind of don't have that outside support either. And me, I didn't want anything to do with that past life. And, you know, mind you, with the events that happened, like, I'm a very loving person. Like, I'm a hugger, you know, and all of that. I was like, don't touch me. I didn't care who you were. Not even family, male, female. Nobody touched me. Like, I was very distant. I didn't want anybody, you know, because of things. Didn't trust anyone. I just kept my distance. Like, it was not uncommon for me to go days, weeks on end without being seen or heard from. It wasn't uncommon, even though I lived 2 miles from my family. Dealt with some suicide attempts. The first one was in late 2015. There was kind of those warning signs that there was some PTSD and stuff going on. But, you know, in my head, I was like, well, I never saw combat. And I associated, you know, PTSD with combat. And I was like, I can't have PTSD. Also, too, I think there was that part of me that didn't want to admit that was going on. Mm-hmm. You know, it was hey, if I ignore it, it'll go away. Yeah. It's not how it works.
Right.
It makes it worse. Until, you know, it boiled over to the point that I was actually so filled with rage, I was gonna stab my ex-wife. To be blunt, like I pulled my pocket knife out so fast I didn't even know. The only thing I could do to keep from hurting her was to hurt myself. So I stabbed myself in the chest 4 times. That's when I was diagnosed with everything. That kind of started that journey. It was still dark for the next 9-10 months. I had 3 more suicide attempts before I finally started to turn things around.
Were you committed when that happened?
What do you mean?
Were you in a behavioral health institution when this was happening?
No. So after I stabbed myself, they sent me to the psych unit, diagnosed me with everything. I was there for probably a week and a half. Got out. I had one other stay in a psych unit. I had a complete meltdown at work, and they ended up calling for an ambulance and stuff, and I got checked in the second time. That was before even my second suicide attempt. My second and third suicide attempts nobody knew about until I started sharing my story years later. Everybody knew about the first one because that's when I was diagnosed with things, and everybody knew about the fourth one because that's when I ended up in jail. But the second and third one, nobody knew about. Second one, I took my pistol and put it to my head, pulled the trigger, it went click. Mind you, like, this is my 1911 that I've put thousands of rounds through, and I've never had an issue out of it, and that's divine intervention in my book.
So you just answered my question. So at the time when that click happened, click no boom, now you're saying it was divine intervention. Did you think that at the time?
Oh yeah, I knew. I knew. Like, I mean, I was like, this thing never fails. So I guess it didn't fail me then either. Like, I wouldn't be here if it had went boom. I knew. I was like, well, I guess it's not my time.
So tell us about the moments immediately after that.
I guess it's important to preface, I never wanted to die. It was never I want to kill myself. It's, you just get so stuck in like this feeling of hopelessness, and like you're just, if you've ever played video games, it's like playing a first person shooter is how I felt. Like, I see what's going on, I'm going through what's going on, but it's like you're not actually there.
You're still detached.
Yeah, I was so detached. That's a great way to put it. So detached from what was going on. Like, I could see it, I could feel it, I was going through the motions, but I wasn't actually there. And I hated that. And that's, after they finally got me on some medication that helped. The first few made things way worse. Like, first thing was Zoloft.
I experienced that as well. Yeah.
Zoloft, that made me violent. I went in, I was like, you need to get me off this now. Like, I'm going to kill someone. Like, it was bad. But yeah, and that was when they finally got in, and I hated that feeling. I hated feeling like I wasn't in control of my life, and I was just going through the motions. I've got stuff going on with my ex-wife. Like, we were married at the time, but I swear she would just push the buttons, and it would just make things worse. Like, it was like she was intentionally trying to push me to be this bad person. I don't know how to deal with this. I'm not getting, that support from the veteran community because I'm still detached from it. And two, it was kind of like, I felt like an outsider too. Like, yeah. Like, I'm, I was like, well, I don't belong in this community because of this is what my experience is. I don't belong in the veteran community. Since then, I've learned, that's not true. And, but at that point in time, I was like, yeah, no, like, they won't accept me. Like, I'm a bad, I had that view that my command had of me is what I would be perceived by the.
It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is. I mean, because it's what you think of me, I'll think of me.
Yeah.
And what I think of me, I'll be.
For sure. Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean.
So, yeah, that was the second one. Third one, Oh yeah. So I never wanted to die. I never really wanted to die. I lost my train of thought. I was just so tired of feeling that way, like that disconnected, dealing with this stuff. You got the outside variables, and it just seemed like it was never going to end. And there was always that little voice inside of me saying, "You can do this. Keep pushing." And I'd always try to listen to that, but then that one little thing would come along, and it was usually something really little. Like you can carry the weight of everything, but then you add that little tiny bit, and that's enough to tip the scale. And again, I would have to drink heavy every time just to try to drown out that voice enough that I could go through with it. The third time, I took all my sleeping pills at once. I had like 3 different kinds, close to like 45 pills, and I took them all at one time. Laid down in my bed, expected never to wake up. Woke up 2.5 days later, middle of the day. I was like, oh.
In your bed?
In my bed.
Okay,
yeah.
Wow, okay.
And I was like, oh, I guess. Yeah, like I said, like it wasn't uncommon for me to be gone for days on end.
You were isolated.
Yeah. And so nobody would have came looking for me. Or they're like, oh, he's just disappeared again. It would probably taken weeks for anyone to actually have come looking.
Yeah.
But yeah, I woke up, it's bright and sunny, and I look at the date and time, and I'm like, oh, it's like 2.5 days later. I was like, well, I guess it's not my time, And attempt 2 and 3 were about 3, maybe 4 weeks apart. One was in July, one was in August of 2016, and then in September I made my 4th and final attempt. That time, again, drank heavy, like 2/5 of vodka, tied a rope in a tree outside my great-grandma's house. That's where I was at the time. Took a couple of cinder blocks, stacked them up, tied it up there, and was sitting there contemplating it still, with my head in the rope, and I wobbled, and the cinder blocks fell. I wasn't even sure that I was actually still going to go through with it. But next thing you know, I'm just hanging there. I was like, I guess this is it. Everything went black. And then kind of came to, and I'm laying on my back staring up at the rope in the tree. Still hanging there. My great-grandma noticed that something was off and had followed me out there. So she witnessed the whole thing. Again, some divine intervention, because nobody understands how I got out of that rope in the tree. My grandma said I was literally hanging there limp, and then I just kind of fell to the ground. It was crazy. So she called my grandparents, who called 911. They, things went bad. Like I said, people know about the 1st and the 4th, because the 4th one, I ended up in jail. Ended up getting into it with the cops to keep it short. It was going well, then it didn't go well. One of the police officers decided to try to get physical, and switch flipped, and things went sideways. So instead of going to get help, I ended up in jail. Again, very, very fortunate. Believe there's definitely some divine intervention there, because I should have gotten felony charges, for what happened. But I got a misdemeanor and spent 60 days in jail. The judge was understanding and lenient, and wanted me to get help. That's kind of the beginning of the road back. We've talked about faith too. In that period of darkness, like, I was in church, I live in the Bible Belt, so there's a church door open every day. I was pretty much in church 7 days a week, sometimes twice a day, Sundays and Wednesdays or whatever. And I was just I was looking for the answers in my faith. And unfortunately, I lived in the Bible Belt. So fortunately and unfortunately, I lived in the Bible Belt. There's a lot of people that sit in church pews that are not Christians. And I don't care if I offend you by saying it. If I offend you by saying that, you're probably one of the people I'm talking about.
Probably should feel convicted.
Yeah. And it was those people, that judged me on what I'd been through, and there was so much judgment in there, and which is why I say those are those church folks, not Christians. And I didn't realize that till later. I was like, wow, like Christians are the worst people in the world. Like, I was like, why do I want to be? I was kind of dealing with that, but I was like leaning into my faith. I was like, I don't get my faith from Christians. I get it from God, But I was also conflicted because of, the stuff going on there. But, I was leaning so heavy into my faith and, big into my fitness. But I still was like in a tailspin.
Yeah.
So I moved out to, again, one of those divine things. Like after I got out of jail, I had a friend that was stationed in Hawaii, still in the Marine Corps, and she was basically like, hey, you need to get your together. Suggested that I move out there. I had two options. Like there was a faith-based rehab there that I could have gone to close to home. I could see the pros and cons of how either one would be, what God wanted me to do. I was like, I can go to Hawaii and I can start over and I can, rebuild myself. I won't have a support system. I won't have any of that. But I also won't have the things that are attributing to where I'm at. Like this can be a fresh start for me, opportunity to redefine who I am. Or I can go to this rehab. I have this support system. I've got that. It's faith-based. And I was like, God, I can see how either one of these is what you want. So, I asked for guidance. And literally he worked it out to – I knew I was supposed to go to Hawaii. I was like, well, I had a plane ticket for $421. And I was like, all right, God, I've given myself a 2-week window to get to one of these. Like, because I know if I wait, I won't do it. So I'm like 2 weeks. Mind you, this is right after Thanksgiving, right around Thanksgiving time. I found like all the plane tickets were like over $1,000.
Holidays.
Just for and it was the 75th anniversary of Pearl Harbor too. So like all the plane tickets for a one-way are like over $1,000. And I was like, yeah, I guess I'm not going to Hawaii. But something told me one day to check again. And literally every plane ticket for that day is like $800 to $1,000, $1,200. And there was one plane ticket for $441, $200 or $20 more than my ticket. I was like, all right, like if that's not a sign that this is what I'm supposed to do, then I don't think I know what a sign is. So yeah, I ended up booking that. Sold some stuff to cover the other $20. Flew out to Hawaii on a one-way ticket. Stepped away from my faith. That's kind of why I mentioned like the being hurt by church folks. And I was like, well, I don't need that. Like, church folks are... But obviously, once you step away from church, like, slowly the praying falls out. Slowly
You've isolated yourself. And the church is not a physical building. It's
the people.
It's people.
Yeah. Well, which is a lesson I learned along the way. I stepped away from that. And once I did, I kind of fell out of everything. Yeah. But now I was actually doing things to help my mental health. And I was doing, so now I switched to physical health and mental health. And all of that comes together to, what I ended up realizing, like I was in a better place when I was in Hawaii, a lot better place. But I was still kind of missing something for a while. And I didn't ever feel that complete wholeness until I started leaning into, my faith. So I was working on the spiritual, the mental, and the physical. And it's kind of like a three-leg stool, if one of them's out of whack, then it's going to be unbalanced. Yep. And it wasn't until I worked on all three that I kind of had that full, balance. And that's kind of when I realized that. But yeah, I would say Hawaii was kind of, jail was that wake-up call. If I didn't do something different, I was going to be one of those guys that, and unfortunately there was other vets in there. Like, I can't remember if we talked about it on here or right before, but, like statistically 1 in 3 veterans reports a history of arrest, which is crazy. There were several other veterans in there with me in jail, and they kind of like pulled me to the side and they were like, bro, don't end up like us. You're not like us. Don't end up like us. These are guys that are in and out of jail all the time. And it was kind of that advice and that realization, if I didn't change something, I was going to end up like them, or worse, I was going to end up dead. And I knew I needed to do something different. So that was kind of that turning point. And then I stopped taking medication when I got to Hawaii because I was like, well, I don't like the way it,
Understand.
Didn't. And so I kind of accidentally stumbled my way into my own healing. There's a lot of mountains out there, beautiful mountains, and I'm kind of just like that person that I'm like, I want to see what the view is like from up there.
You were on Oahu?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you walk up a mountain in Oahu, the climate's different on the other side of it.
Yeah. Oh, and the views from up there, it's like ridiculous. So I'd be like, I want to go up there, and I'd find the trail, and I would just hike all these mountains, and I was always hiking. And I started unknowingly, like, basically meditating, because I would just sit up there and just be so present in that moment and just observing what was going on. I started, and I'm telling you, like, if you think your problems are big, go find a mountain and hike it, and then look out across the view. You are so small in comparison to the world.
That's kind of the point.
Exactly. And, that was kind of like that realization. And I found a lot of healing through nature, and then horses as well. Horses helped me with my emotions a lot. I was an angry person, very angry, and you can't.
Horses don't like angry people.
No,
and they know.
Yeah,
they sure do.
And it's funny because I always tell like veterans and other people that I was like, you can lie to me, you can even lie to yourself, but you can't lie to them horses. That horse tells me everything I need to know about what you got going on inside. So, yeah, I found a lot of healing through that in my time out there. So, really, that's 2017 that I got out there. So, between 2017 and 2019. 2019 is when I realized I needed all three pieces. But I was already on that healing path from, like, 2017 to 2019. I don't know. Did you have a follow-on question before I go more? Or
No.
Okay. That was 2019 is where things kind of got interesting. Again, I tried the drink socially thing, to dive out. So like I was like, well, I don't need to go completely sober. I'll just drink, socially. And then again, that fell back into full-blown alcoholism. And so in 2019, I was back to being that raging alcoholic with a rage problem. And, I was like, okay, like, we're done. And that's kind of when I was like, okay, I need to get back into church. I need to get back into my faith. Started going to a church. First time I'd ever gone to a church that felt like home. New Hope Windward. If anybody's ever out in Hawaii or watching this from Hawaii, go check out New Hope Windward. It's like a mega church. Like there's like 2,500 people that go there every Sunday. And the first day I walked in, I knew there was something different about it because they said, welcome, this is your first time here, isn't it? I was like, y'all know, in this big place, that it's my first time the moment I walk in here. Like that kind of, I was like,
we
what?
can tell.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, whoa, y'all knew. And then when I came back the next week, they were like, welcome back. Like, and they knew, I felt welcome from day one. And I was like, I've never felt this in a church. You walk into a church that you never been to in the South. Sometimes they'll be like, oh, hey, welcome. But other times they'll be like,
and everybody in the pews turns.
You're the record scratch. Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, who are you? What are you doing here? But they were so welcoming. And, I quickly got involved in the church and just kind of grew. And it was crazy because, like, everybody around me, I had a lot of negative self-talk. And I didn't believe in myself a lot. I was very broken when I got there. Like, even though I'd put in this work and I'd come so far, I was still very broken. And my self-image was so skewed. Yeah, not screwed, skewed. And everybody just kind of, like, fed into me. And, like, I was just hearing all these things about myself that I had never thought about myself. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not me. I'm not that. And then, when you're constantly getting told, hey, like, you're so smart and you're this and you're that and you're all this positive talk, at first you're like, I've never heard gifts. That. And after time, it's basically like mirrors reflecting back to me, like, who I truly was on the inside. And I realized, I was like, oh, You start to believe those things about yourself, just the same way you've believed the negative things. So who you surround yourself with completely matters. But yeah, man, it was
life-changing.
Yeah.
life-changing. Yeah, for sure.
Well, that's like the old expression, show me your friends and I'll show you your future.
Yeah,
That's what the body of Christ is supposed to be.
100%.
Yes.
And mindset too. I'll say mindset's another huge thing. Like who you surround yourself with, but also what your mindset is huge.
Perfect.
So how long were you out there in Hawaii?
I was out there about 3.5 years. Went out December 8th, 2017, and then whenever COVID hit is when I left.
It got crazy in Hawaii. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and so I was actually homeless and I was employed when COVID hit, but I was homeless when COVID hit. So kind of at that time in 2019 where I realized things needed to be different. I had lost my job at the ranch I worked at, which I also lived at. So just like that, I was homeless and unemployed.
Wow. Okay.
So don't feel sorry for me. I was sleeping in a hammock on the beach in Hawaii. Like there's worse
places to be unemployed.
Yeah,
and unhoused,
and homeless.
So,
yeah. So it that was kind of where things kind of shifted for me. I started going back to church, and I started leaning into the veteran community as well. And that time I started working on Second Chance, and that's where I met my mentor, Chris Hoffman, who was a Marine vet. And went through a program with him, kind of kickstarted all of that stuff, kicked me into that business mindset. Found a job, like 3 weeks after being unemployed or such. Doing something I never thought I'd do. I was always like, I will never work in a restaurant. I'm never gonna do that. And it's funny, kind of humbling.
Yeah.
Worked at a pizza place, and I actually loved it. It was one of my favorite jobs. I was sitting there making pizzas for people all day, every day, and I actually enjoyed it.
Work with your hands.
Yeah.
Lots of food. Get to interact with a lot of people.
Yeah, and honestly, that helped me out a lot too,
Yeah.
because I didn't have to worry about food. Like there's pizza left over, they would send me home a pizza because everybody knew I lived out of my car and slept on a beach, and so they would just be like, "Here, take this pizza."
So what brought you back?
COVID. So what happened is, they started shutting down everything, the beach parks, the gyms, and kind of like my routine at that time was like, I got up every morning and I would wake up, watch the sunrise, and then I would go to Starbucks. I would sit there, I'd buy a coffee, and I'd sit there and I'd work for 4 or 5 hours, work on trying to build Second Chance, and then I would leave there. I would go to work, and I would work until like 8 or 9, depending on what day it was. When I left there, I would go to the gym, because that was one of the first things to do was buy a gym membership, because guess what's at a gym? A shower. Mm-hmm. And
I thought you were going to say girls, but okay, yeah.
Those two, but I really didn't ever care about that. I was like, I would go get my workout in, get my workout in, and take my shower so I could be clean, and then I would, go drive to the beach park, set up my hammock with a tarp over top, because it rains randomly in Hawaii,
Yes,
and you
it
never
does.
know when.
Yes, it does.
I would set up my little camp, go to sleep, repeat every day. Well, Starbucks closed. I had nowhere to go get my Wi-Fi and work on my business. The gym closed, so I had nowhere to get my showers or work out. The beach parks are closed, so that was my backup shower and toilets and all that stuff. And then, I still had a job, but that was it. And I was like, things were just changing so quickly. I was like, I need to get out of here. And I got a plane ticket back to Arkansas for less than $200. And I was like,
nice.
I was like,
Here's your
that's my sign that it's time to get out of here. And it sucked, man. I loved Hawaii. It was amazing.
Arkansas is not Hawaii.
It's not. It's beautiful too, though. But like, people hate on Arkansas, but it is very beautiful.
The natural state.
It's called the natural state for a reason. There's no jobs or anything there. It's all I mean, there are some jobs, but
There's
you know,
2 or 3.
yeah, it's natural state because it's so natural and beautiful, and that's about all it's got. Hunting and fishing, that's about all you got.
I could retire. I could do that.
Yeah.
All right. So tell us about Second Chance and Devil Dog.
Yeah, so Second Chance was my first project. You know, while I was working, like I mentioned, I found healing through horses, and I worked as a trail guide at a ranch called Kualoa Ranch in Hawaii. And man, it was literally, I'm going along on a trail one day, and the thought just hits me. It's like, hey, if this stuff helps you this much, how many other people could it help?
Yeah.
Just randomly. And I was like, oh. And that's kind of when that idea planted. And then I started telling everybody, and this is why I'm so huge on, like, you speak things into existence. Because I started telling everybody, like, my 5-year plan was to do this stuff to help people, you know? And I sat on it for 2 years, just telling people that this was my plan. And, you know, I left that ranch, went to another one, worked there for about 9 months or so. And then that's when I was became homeless and unemployed. And it took me being homeless and unemployed to get off my butt and kickstart towards that. I had a life coach who was an Army vet. I reached out to him, and I was literally applying. I applied for over 100 jobs, and I was told I was either overqualified or I never heard back. Overqualified to flip burgers at McDonald's, which, yes, I get that, but I need a job. I need money.
Yeah.
You know, I don't care if I'm overqualified or not. And I was like, hey, like, I reached out to him for help trying to get a job, and he kind of gave me that advice that put me on that path to entrepreneurship. He was like, well, what do you want to do with your life? And, you know, I started listening to this. He's like, no. If you could be anywhere in 5 years. And I was like, well, doing this. So he kind of set me down that path. Grateful for him for that. Yeah, but that came out of that place of homeless and unemployed. And so the goal was originally to get a ranch, which is why it has Second Chance Rehabilitation Ranch. That's still a long-term goal, but I realized it was going to take a lot of money that I didn't have and resources. And one of the first things I did with it was I was like, well, as I grow this, I don't want it to come out of left field and people be like, out of nowhere, oh, where's this? I wanted people to see it grow in the process. So I created a LinkedIn profile for it, and almost immediately I was getting requests for help, and I turned away three people. And I hated it because, you know, they were asking for help. I was like, well, I don't have a ranch yet. I don't have any of this. And I'm back in Arkansas at this point, by the way. Like, COVID set in. I'm back. I'm at my grandparents', living on my grandparents' property. I've got like 3 horses at this point. And I had to turn people. I didn't have to. I turned people away because I was like, well, I don't have the ranch yet. And I hated it because there's a lot of people out there that say they're doing things and they're just flapping gums, you know? Mm-hmm. And I like to be a person of action, not words. And it made me feel, when I turned those people away, like I was one of those people that was just talking about it. Yeah. And that didn't sit well with me.
I've discovered in my transition out of the military that there is a lot of kind of what I think of as the veteran transition, you know, complex, where there's a cottage industry of people who, whether it's through the profit or nonprofit sectors, both make their living off of talking about all this stuff, but there's not any actual substance to it.
I know quite a few of those people. Yeah. And I felt like I was one of them because I was like, hey, here I am talking about how this is what I'm going to do. And so the 4th person that reached out was a police officer, and she was going through a rough time. And I started to say no, and I caught myself, and I was like, not this time. There's got to be something that we can do.
Yes.
There's something we can do. And, you know, doing retreats was always part of the plan, but it was kind of like after, you know, like we'll get the ranch going and then we'll do these retreats things. And I was like, well, we have 3 horses. We can do horseback riding. Hell, there's a lot of places to go camping here. We can do camping as well. You know, I started putting together the retreats. And so, you know, that was where I really, you know, I kind of flipped the script and started focusing on running retreats, getting veterans and first responders out into nature. You know, that we ran our first one in 2021. So almost 2 years later, 2 veterans. That was it. Kind of small. Yeah, you almost are like you want to be disappointed by it, but you're like, hey, like, dude, you cut your teeth. You know? Yeah, exactly.
The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step.
Yeah, exactly. It was like you're like, oh well, we did it. You know, like we did one. You know, over since then, you know, we've done probably like 15 to 18 of them. Some of those in conjunction with other organizations, or you know, and we've helped a couple hundred veterans with that. That kind of morphed into, you know, like I was talking about that loss of purpose, and things like that. And you know, like I said, I realized our purpose never came from the uniform that we wore. That we think that the uniform we wore, whether it's, you know, Army, Marines, firefighter, law enforcement, whatever it is, we think that that gives us purpose. It doesn't. It fuels our purpose. Our purpose is much deeper than that uniform we put on. And I started looking at it instead of like the Marines wasn't my purpose. It was a mission. So I kind of look at it like a tree, and that's kind of like what I teach people is it's like a tree. The missions are the branches of that tree. You know, those are the things that we do that, because like branches on a tree have leaves. The leaves are what collect the sunlight and nurture the tree. The core of that tree is the purpose. So like the missions feed our purpose, and then what anchors us in that purpose is the roots, which are your core values. So I figured out, you know, if you help people figure out what their core values are and look at their missions and what fed them and grew them, you can figure out where your deeper purpose is. And I realized, you know, a lot of people didn't know how to do that. So I started teaching, you know, working with, I would get a lot of calls or texts from people about, hey, like there's this veteran that's struggling, and, you know, and it was always the same things. I have no purpose. I lost my identity. You never lost your identity. You probably didn't realize what your actual identity was. Yeah. You let your identity become that uniform. And it makes sense when you're 18 years old and you join the military. You haven't had time to figure out who you are. And now for the next however long you're in the military, you're exactly who the military tells you are. And kind of jealous of those people that figure it out while they're in. You know, they're able to be like, well, this is what I want to do after. Like, This isn't entirely me. This is just part of me. Some of us like really buy in. Like, I'm a Marine. I have to be this. And there's, you know, then for the rest of your life, you're just a Marine. You know, I mean, once Marine, always Marine. But
of course,
still, like, that's not the only chapter of your book. There's more to you than just being a Marine. That's just a chapter. Everything's just a chapter. So, you know, I started doing that crisis intervention coaching, helping guys find that mission and figure out what their next mission is, figuring out what their purpose is. Mindset, like I said, mindset's a huge thing. Where, you know, you're going to attract whatever you're in. You know, if you have a constantly negative mindset, for example, you buy a new car, all of a sudden you start seeing those kind of cars everywhere, right? Like, I used to drive a tow truck. Before I started driving a tow truck, I hardly ever noticed tow trucks. Now I'm like, oh, tow truck, you know? Yeah. And it's the same with like our mindset, you know? If you're constantly thinking negative thoughts, you're going to find more and more negative things. Yeah. So if you start thinking about the positive things, you're going to see more and more positives. So like, hey, sit down and write a list of 5 things you're thankful for. The first couple of days, that might be hard. And then guess what? Next thing you know, you're like, only 5? You know, you start to find more and more things to be positive, you know, thankful for and be positive. And, you know, so helping guys switch their mindsets, because you're going to find more things. You know, there's a lot of things to be thankful for in life. And
so to your point, I think most of us would agree that anecdotally, the people that you know in your life who live with a heart posture of gratitude are generally going to be you're more fulfilled. I hate using the word happy but you know, you're fulfilled and you're joyous people.
For sure. Because
it's all about your heart posture.
Oh, absolutely. And if you want to change that, like, do something nice for someone. Yeah. Like, random acts of kindness. Dude, like, excuse me. Like going through the drive-through, it's weird because I hate getting told thank you and stuff. So I always do it at like the drive-through. I'll like pay for the person behind me, and I'll try to get out of there before they know. But even just buying food for somebody behind you, complete stranger, like it'll make their day. It makes their day. But guess what? You also feel really great about that. You're like, wow, I did that for somebody else.
And you never know what kind of day, week, month that person's having.
Exactly.
The impact that something silly like buying a Happy Meal for a mom, maybe she's a single mom and she's really struggling. You just bought her kid a Happy Meal. And, that's $7. Who cares, right? But it makes a big deal to them.
Oh, one time it made a big deal to the person working at the thing.
There's a third party, right?
Yeah, I literally pulled up and I was like, hey, how much is I just instinctively was like, how much? And then I realized I really didn't care what she said, or what he said. And I was like, yeah, go ahead and pay for that as well. And he goes, oh, do you know that? I don't think so. He's like, you're buying food? Yeah. And bro literally started to cry. He's like, that is the most amazing thing.
Because you have no idea what his day's been like, too, right?
And he's like, wow, you would do that? I was like, yeah. But then again, like now that person's like, oh, like I have a friend that, he said every act of kindness creates a ripple effect without end. I think that's true for any action we take. If we choose negative actions, that creates a ripple of negativity, versus if we do something positive, that's going to ripple out. Like that's going to impact that person behind the cashier. They're like, wow, I want to do something positive for somebody now. That person that you did something for, they're like, wow, and it spreads on.
It's almost like our old friend Uncle Jesus. Dan loves it when I do this. It's almost like he knew what he was saying when he said that we should love each other, because when we're loving each other, you're not doing it for the other person. Ultimately, you're doing it for your own heart and your own spirit.
Yeah. I mean, it's
like
you
knew what he was talking about or something.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? It is for that other person, but it's just as much for you as well. It keeps that joyful heart. And, on that too, like, that's funny that you mentioned that, because that was one of those things when I was going through my healing journey that, like, one of those light bulb moments, sitting there and it says love your neighbor as yourself. And I realized that I was like, we usually think of that like, we're supposed to love our neighbor. But it hit me and I realized, I was like, hold on, how can I truly love other people if I look in the mirror and I don't like the person that's looking back? And I'm not talking that, oh, I love myself, like that conceited self-love, but you have to actually love yourself. And by that, I mean, like, if you don't like the person that's looking back at you, and you have that negative self-talk, then you're going to not love other people as effectively as you could. So I had to evaluate that and be like, wow, I don't love the person that's looking back at me. And how do I change that? I become a person that I approve of. So I got to work at becoming that better version of myself, so that I can look in the mirror and I can say, I love that guy. I'm proud of who that person is. And then once you get to that point, then, hey, guess what? Now I'm capable of showing love to other people along the way. Yeah. But
so, Second Chance Ranch, up and running. When did you start the Double Dog family?
Yeah, so 2 years ago, I got a service dog. It was one of those things I was like, I don't need that. You
got one for you personally.
For me, yeah. I used to be like, oh, I don't need a service dog. I'm not that bad, or whatever. And then I started hanging around a couple people that had service dogs, and I saw what it did for them, and even what their dogs did for me. And I was like, yeah, maybe I could use a service dog. So a buddy of mine, started a service dog program, and he. I got the first dog to come out of their program, Levi, and life-changing. But again, it was new, and I didn't understand, and him and I didn't have the best relationship at first because I didn't understand him. And again, like I said, I'm always striving to be better and learn new things and grow. So it led me to want to learn more about dogs so I could have a better relationship with him and understand him, which ultimately led to, I ended up meeting Laura, and she was a dog trainer. So I started, learning from her, and we actually met here in Fayetteville.
You're welcome.
Yeah. We met here in Fayetteville, and she was getting ready to leave from training here. She got a new opportunity in Illinois. Talked to the guy, and he was willing to, bring me in and teach me how to train. So we set off to Illinois together. I learned how to train from him, and just call it difference of opinions. We went different ways, and we were looking at start going work for somebody else, and I was like, we have the experience to do this on our own. We're capable of doing this on our own. Why work for somebody else? Why not run our own dog training business? She's a phenomenal trainer. I mean, I like to say we're both really good at what we do. I'm good at managing the business side and all of that. Like it's one of those, like, the things that I can do it all, but the things that I'm not that great at, are her strong suits, and vice versa. We kind of just complement very well.
That's good.
Because she was like, well, when she first became a dog trainer, she had her own business, and it didn't go well because she's not super. She'd rather train the dogs, She's not super into the business and doesn't get the business side.
Understood. Yeah.
I thrive in that. I'm on top of that. I'll tell you, I'm already thinking 5 years down the road and making the plays now to get us where we need to go 5 years, 5-10 years down the road. I'm making those calls now, but also working here. Like, I can do all of that. That's not her strong suit. Her strong suit is taking this dog from, hey, it's terrible, to, oh my God, like, I didn't know my dog was my dog was capable of doing this. Like, she's phenomenal at that stuff. So yeah, we just complement each other really well. So we started Devil Dog in August of last year. It was like, we were like, well, what do we call it? And I was like, I don't know. I was just like Devil Dog K9. And then, which is ironic because, like I said, I used to not want to associate with the Marine Corps at all. I looked it up, and I was like, surprisingly, there was not a Devil Dog K9. And I was like, I feel like that would be the first name as a Marine I would have taken.
Is Devil Dog K9 redundant?
A bit, I would think.
Yeah, I have heard that, but I was like, I really don't care. That's why it's Devil Dog, one word instead of two words. Yeah, but Devil Dog K9.
What is the overall purpose of Devil Dog? What's the mission statement or the pitch?
Yeah, so our mission is to give everyone the canine of their dreams. So whatever it is that you want from your dog, or if you want a dog, for example, I know we were kind of talking about Ben Owen earlier. Ben reached out to us. He was looking for a protection dog to help them on their mission in the streets. So we found him a job, and that's the thing, is like, yeah, I can train you a dog from scratch, but I'm going to do the best thing for you. So we found a dog that was 95% to where he needed, and it was going to be cheaper to do it that way for him. So, we hooked him up with this dog. Then we, did the final touches, got it, did the situational training with him, finished the dog off, and got it to him to meet his mission. I'm not one of those ones that's too proud to let somebody else do part of the work and then finish it off. I don't have to be. I just care about you being happy with what you got.
It's like Reagan said, it's amazing what we can accomplish if we don't worry about who gets the credit.
Exactly. Yeah. As long as you have the dog that you want, and like he's said multiple times, he's like, I've had protection dogs in the past, and this is the best one. And I'm not we're not 100% responsible for that. We got a good dog, but we found him the right dog that fit his mission and is capable of doing everything.
Placement and training. That's the whole mission. Yep.
Yeah. And so, we do pet dogs, and we like doing pet dogs. If you're listening to this, not watching, I rolled my eyes there. I mean, pet dogs are nice.
If you were unclear.
Yeah, the pet dogs are nice. Taking this little turd of a dog and turning it into a good. Yeah. You turn it into this, and it's cool because the owners were like, I didn't know my dog was capable of behaving like this. And it's nice to see that transformation, but we're both more passionate about the working dogs. I like protection dogs, explosive or odor detection. I have one that is my own personal, and she's a protection and explosive detection dog in training. We're working on getting her licensed so I can do explosive detection with her. But right now she's on 3 odors, and I love doing that. The protection and the odor. Also, service dogs. Like originally, I was like, there's a lot of civilians that could use service dogs, and I was trying to stay away from helping veterans. Unfortunately, because there are a lot of great organizations out there doing service dogs for veterans. It just takes too long.
Yeah.
And there's stipulations around some of it. Like, one of the guys I served with reached out. He's like, look, I can't get one from an organization. He's like, because I have another dog in the house, or, this or that. And so, like, I'll work with those people, and try to help those veterans out. Yeah. But, yeah, again, it's my purpose is to serve and to give back to people. And so even in training dogs, like, even if it's a pet dog, I'm increasing your value or adding value to your life, like I'm taking your dog. Now your dog isn't a complete turd. You can take it on a walk. You're happy with it. So, even
I have a turd dog.
So before we wrap this up, a couple of questions. One, because you said that, you're the planner, as it were, and you think, 5 years out and whatnot. From today, what is your 5-year expectation or your 5-year long view?
Oh, we'll have
not just a double dog canine. I mean, of whatever, whether it's still the ranch or this venture or whatever.
Yeah, I will not be in Illinois. Yeah, so kind of 5 years is like I want to grow Double Dog and Second Chance together. I want to have locations everywhere, So I don't know where I'll be living in 5 years. Somewhere other than Illinois, somewhere a little more friendly. But yeah, I just want to grow both of those business, especially Double Dog, to multiple locations. I'll probably be in Memphis, if we're being real, around Memphis. Really invested in what's going on there and cleaning that up. It's close, near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
But, having locations for Double Dog Canine, growing that, using it as an opportunity to help, people that are struggling, getting, again, making the world a better place. I've done my fair share of things in my life that made the world not a great place.
Yeah.
And, I just want to spend the rest of my life making it better. So.
Okay. Did you have another one?
Just wrap up.
So, your military, your path into the military during and then after. We ask everybody more or less the same question, and it's going to be this. It was a bumpy road for you, but when it's all said and done, sitting here at this table now, not necessarily 5 years ago, now, as far as your military service is concerned, would you do it all over again?
100%, yeah. Not at this moment, I wouldn't. But if I went back, I would do it, yeah.
No, I mean, the day you got kicked out, you may not have felt that way. I mean, that you have, some experience, some reflection, and some hindsight.
Yeah, I absolutely. The lessons I learned along the way, the skills I learned, the friends I made. Also, too, I realized I wouldn't be sitting here where I am today. I wouldn't be the person I am today if any single thing went different. Everything along the way made me who I am. The mistakes I made, the things that happened to me, all of that kind of stuff. Every single thing along the way led me to be who I am today, and I'm happy with who I am today. I mean, there's things that still need work. We all need work,
yeah.
But I can overall say that I'm happy with who I am today, and I know if anything else was different, I wouldn't be the person that I am.
Everything's a chapter in the book, right?
If I can say one more, Dan, then I'll hand off to you. This is just Vogel talking here. Based off what some of the things that you told us today, some of the near misses, divine intervention, whatever you want to call it, it seems to me that, I mean, your life is a miracle. You've lived and experienced miracles. And I can't thank you enough for coming and sharing that with us today. And I'll hand off to Dan to close here.
No, it's a good way to. It's a good way to end it.
So
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, man.
You're always welcome here.
Thanks for having me,
brother.
So that was interesting. Certainly longer than I was expecting.
Yeah.
The guy had quite a journey, shall we say.
Just a few years in the Marine Corps, and a lot of it was spent in confinement, which he was acquitted of. So, or at least not charges pressed. It's not quite the same thing, but
yeah, the charges were dismissed.
Yeah.
But still, he is a veteran, and so he deserves for his story to be told. And what a story it is!
Yeah,
but
for sure.
we'll go back to the beginning. He has a proud family history of service across different services. I know that this is kind of absurd, but I think he said it was his uncle or something was on a submarine during Vietnam.
Yeah, we flew right past that. Yeah.
And I mean, that's just, when you think of Vietnam, you think, Marines and soldiers and corpsmen and pilots dropping napalm and guys charging through the jungle and wading through rice paddies and stuff. You don't really think about guys on submarines.
Which you should, because that was at the height of the Cold War. And so there's a hot war going on in Southeast Asia, which was a proxy
of the Cold War.
Cold War. Yeah. Meanwhile, subs are playing war games, for lack of a better term, all over oceans, all over the entire world. So being a submariner during the Cold War was critically important. They just don't really get all the attention.
Yeah, but I mean, when he said that, I was like, wow.
Yeah,
it's just not something you really think about. But a proud, distinguished history of service, to be sure.
Yeah,
going back at least till World War I.
World War I is where we kicked it off, which maybe more. We don't know.
Yeah. Very cool, though. Very cool. And because of that history of service, he had said that he wanted to join the Marines. I think he said it was like his first words at like 2 years old or something like that. Or something. Yeah, I know, right? But it wasn't until he was in high school, because I mean, this is after 9/11, where there was a very
than us.
very large push into service by particularly young men, but across the board. But it wasn't until later, with the two particular incidents that he talked about, being at the Lebanon, or the Beirut bombing memorial,
excuse me,
and
right.
Then doing the Mother's Day with the Gold Star,
Stars,
that it really kind of like sunk in, and he wasn't doing it as something to do
college money,
college money or family tradition or anything like that. It was something he wanted to do because he was willing to make that sacrifice.
Yeah, he was moved.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's pretty awesome. Not everybody in uniform, feels that way. I mean, that's okay. Everybody's got their different motivations for service, but that is still pretty special.
Yeah.
And he got that before enlisting. So
I just think it's interesting when we talk to the younger veterans who presumably came in after us. The ones who joined after 9/11 basically came into they grew up in a different world as us, and they came into a different military, Army, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force. They came into a different military than us guys who were either, you were already in. I basically had one as an ROTC guy. I was basically in by the time I was contracted and all that. So we signed up under very, very different circumstances than post 9/11 enlisted and eventually officers as well. So they're joining for very different reasons, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And now we're, years removed from the end of the global war on terror. And so, there's a new generation that's joining up now. We were kind of joking when I was at TRADOC couple years ago, we were joking around about all the old guys are sitting around saying like, "Oh, these dang millennials." It's like millennials aren't the ones who are joining now. Millennials are in their 30s or maybe early 40s at this point. It's the Gen Z and Gen Alpha who are so like we're beyond the millennials now at this point, and they've come up in a very different world than us.
Yeah, I mean they were born with the world at war.
Yeah.
So it is a very different mindset to grow up in. Yeah.
So he's not our first guest to have a redemption arc.
Yeah. Certainly not.
Little different than what we've had so far, but you could see as he some of this still affects him. Yeah. Rightfully so. Excuse me. Excuse me. Rightfully so. You could see while he was talking about all this, but I can't imagine going through confinement like that, particularly over something, false pretext, right? Feel the abandonment, the hopelessness. Even after he was sprung, he was still isolated. His command had turned their back on him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he did himself no favors in the leading up to it with his personal behavior, which he's accepted his role in that.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, while he was spiraling and things were getting worse, he said that at least one of his NCOs noticed that something was going on and talked to him about it, but the rest of them didn't. Like, how does an entire chain of command lose sight of the fact that one of your highest performers, your go-getter guy, your get-it-done guy, is falling apart right in front of you, and you just let it go?
It's negligence at the leadership level. At the name tape level, your first line supervisor, and maybe second. It's negligence. It's either incompetence, or I don't want to say malice, but indifference might be even worse than malice in some instances, where you were just woefully indifferent to the suffering of others. That's almost worse than maliciousness.
Well, I mean, with the people that you are tasked to be in charge of, you are tasked with leading them, training them, taking care of them, their welfare, their not just their ability to show up on time, but you are in charge of them in every facet of their life. And to lose focus of that is...
Yeah. I mean, it's a leadership failure.
Poor leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So...
But it sounds like, from what he said, that while he was in confinement, he found out that several of the other guys in the unit had been discharged for other infractions. He didn't say what they had done, but other things. Several of the other guys within his unit had been kicked out.
Yeah,
and that is even more indicative.
Command climate
of the command climate.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't, what happened to him was not a one-off incident.
Right.
It was obviously across the unit.
Yeah. Now, he may have gotten it worse than some of the others, but we have a pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, still. Yeah.
Well, he ends up, and again, we're bouncing around a little bit, but he ends up homeless in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Which, if you're going to be homeless, Hawaii is the place to do it.
For the most part.
With all due respect.
Yeah. But, I mean, he went out there to get his life together because he had already, attempted to end it 4 times by the time that he went out there. And through a military connection that he went out there to try to put it back together.
Yeah.
And, he did. He did. That was kind of the place where he started to take better care of himself. But he still had a couple of more tumbles while he was there.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't fix everything overnight.
Yeah. I'm kind of thinking about the old adage that, we talked about faith significance, a lot in this episode. If you are doing the right thing, you're trying to live a godly life, and you're trying to live out your walk, that is when Satan is going to attack you. If you are living in a bad place and doing all the wrong things, more often than not, he's going to just kind of leave you there because he doesn't even need to. He doesn't need to.
The damage is done, and you're doing it on your own now.
Basically. So, sorry. Bad weather here in Fayetteville. We're both clearing our throats a lot today. We're literally in the middle of an ice storm right now. And we're in our nice warm little studio here. So, fits and starts. He, because of COVID and all the shutdowns and all the means of which he was getting by being, homeless and unemployed, he makes it back to, I think he said he went to Arkansas from there.
Yeah. Well, he yes, he did go back to Arkansas, but COVID, if I remember correctly, COVID during that time period, that was when he was getting back into the church. He had gotten a mentor, an Army vet, I believe he said. He had gotten a mentor that was helping him with sort of formulate his business plan and stuff like that for the ranch. So he was really, I guess COVID and the lockdowns is really what kind of
catalyst.
While it locked most people out of most aspects of their life, it really gave him focus on everything that he wanted to do.
Yeah, it was a catalyst.
It really was. And I mean, it was the catalyst for him to come back to the States, or come the States. Yes, Hawaii is still a state.
Is it though? Is it?
I'm sure that sometimes
there are a lot of Hawaiians there that would beg to differ.
Yeah, they would probably disagree. But for him to go back to Arkansas, and for him to actually get started and put that plan and that mentorship into action. So, not everything about COVID was bad.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole other discussion.
Yes.
Some people were able to make something good out of that entire abysmal situation, but I will never say that the whole COVID and the reaction to it was a good thing. That's insane. But some people were able to use the situation to at least further their themselves, and I'm glad that he was able to move on to the next level, which kind of brings us to this. So,
yes,
he left us some pretty cool swag. We got these patches, Devil Dog K9. There's
some stickers
in a patch.
Yep, and
so
now
thank you, Michael.
We have, and we showed Michael some of the other patches and stickers and things that we've gotten from other places, and we really do need to put something up here in the studio to start putting this stuff on display. But these are very cool.
Daniel, it's time.
It's time?
It's time.
It's time. I mean,
our interrogation room.
We could put just like some thumbtacks and just.
Oh yeah, that'll look professional.
Yeah, because that's what we are. We're a professional outlet.
This slickly produced corporate product here. So, thank you, Michael. We loved having you on. Your story is, first of all, it's fascinating. Second of all, I said it in the wind down for that. I think your life has been a miracle. I know it's obviously you've got a lot of living left to do, of course, but you're here for a reason.
Yep.
And we are so glad that you made, because you're traveling, so he was able to swing by the studio here and record.
He was doing some dog. I don't want to call them deliveries, but I mean essentially that's what it was.
Yeah.
He said that they had four. They had 4 kennels in the back of that vehicle.
He had almost like a box truck.
Yeah, I mean it was like a supersized Amazon
or
delivery.
like a big panel van, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was full of all the dog stuff and everything. And you know what, Michael, because I know that you're going to watch this or at least listen to it. If you have anything from the Second Chance Ranch,
we'll throw it in an envelope. We'll take it and put it up.
Yeah, throw it in an envelope. We'll definitely put that up too. I do like that what he said though about the horses.
The horses can tell. Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you can
That's
lie
not-
to me,
yeah.
you can lie to yourself, but you can't lie
That's
to
not.
a horse.
I'm not a big horse guy, but that's not the first time I've heard that.
Yeah.
Our
I
good
do.
friend, our mutual friend Mitch, is
Yeah.
big into the. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love you, Mitch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome, though.
Any parting shots on Mr. Parker?
One last thing, not necessarily for about him, but about his job. To the audience, if you want to see something that does not make sense, just Google search or YouTube search a video of an Osprey taking off and landing.
The military aircraft,
yes.
not the aquatic,
Yeah.
avian.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is a feat of engineering and modern science because it doesn't make sense.
That thing is not supposed to fly.
Yeah. Yeah. And he was working a lot
Well,
to keep this thing
Yeah, I
airborne.
mean, I can't remember if it was on or off camera. He told us the blade hours versus maintenance that's
1 hour
required.
flight.
I think he said 1 to 19. I
Yeah,
think is what he
it's
said.
19 hours of maintenance.
Navy, come on, get it together. Good gracious.
But yes, I mean, if you're into the engineering and flight and stuff like that, you want to see something pretty cool, pretty interesting, and just how did that happen? Just watch a 30-second video of an Osprey taking off and landing. It's
definitely cool. You won't catch me riding on one of those.
Oh, God.
Right on.
You got anything else?
No, I'm good.
All right, then that means it's free fire.
The time has come. Free fire area. So, in honor of the fact that by the time this episode airs, we're basically sitting at a year from the time we recorded and then released our first episode. So, for all intents and purposes, we'll say we're close enough. So, I'm bringing it all the way back to our very first free fire area question.
Man, I was going to do this to you last time, but I didn't.
Okay. So we both get to answer, of course, but you, my friend, get to go first. So, what are you currently reading?
Okay. Well, I just got done, finally, finishing
The Hungarian?
the Turnbull's book. No, I finished that one.
Got it. Okay. Turnbulls.
Yes.
0% chance.
0% chance. I finally finished reading that. I'm also currently trying to work my way through the third book that we have on the Arghandab River Valley, Sons of the Arghandab.
Yes. Review to be published soon.
Yes. And that is really all I have time for right now. I have been trying to read a little bit of my book on Scipio africanus, which I have been working on for like 6 months.
Is it Scipio or Scipio?
Either or.
Because I've always said Scipio. I don't know if that's right or not.
Either or.
Okay.
But every time I pick it up, after 2-3 weeks of not reading it, then I have to go back and back a few pages and start all over again. So it's taking me forever because my time is limited. And you and I are constantly
Doing this?
doing this and finding ways to do more and whatnot. So my reading time has not been what it has been in the past.
It's what we call an economy of force. We do what we can. So Sons of the Arghandab, it's officially publishing this summer, I believe.
I think so.
Joseph Fontenot, who's still serving, still on active duty, and we will have him on when the time is right for that. So stay tuned for that. So really great that we have all of these. It's kind of like a series almost.
Yeah,
this will be our third.
Yeah.
So for those keeping score, this would be the artillery unit that relieved Andrew Bragg's company in the Arghandab.
Yes.
So now we get to pick up where we left off.
And of course, then Andrew Bragg was another company in the same battalion as Will Yeski.
Across the river.
Across the other side of the
Yeah.
river.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Maybe after Fontenot's book, then we can move on to a different part.
A different valley.
Yes, at least.
It's the only valley in Afghanistan, Daniel. Don't you know?
Apparently it is,
Okay,
because it's the only one that I've read about over the last year.
We love you guys, and we appreciate Casemate, the publisher, who's taken on these great stories. So
Yeah,
appreciate
absolutely
that.
outstanding.
Okay.
What about you?
Back on me.
What
All
are you
right.
reading?
I am currently reading. It's funny because when we answered this and asked and answered a year ago, I was talking about how I was anticipating the upcoming Andrew Clavin. It would have been, at the time we recorded this, we would have been anticipating book 4, which I read over the holidays. And now I'm doing this one's an audiobook. Does that count? I know Dan's a purist.
I am a page-turning purist. But I'll allow it.
Page-turning purist. Okay, so an audiobook. I'm doing an older fiction book by Andrew Clavin called Identity Man. And I'm about halfway through it. And it's fiction again. So it's about a crooked cop and a guy who's a kind of a low-level dirtbag, and he gets caught up in some crime, and he gets a new identity, meaning he gets all the paperwork and plastic surgery, so nobody...
Yeah.
Because he was a fugitive, because he got framed for something. And so now him and this crooked cop are about to go at it. And I don't quite know where it's going. So I will not speculate.
Maybe they become best friends.
That would be a plot twist. So anyway, I love Andrew Clavin. His fiction's great. His nonfiction's great. His commentary is great. So I highly recommend pretty much anything that he does or touches. So I needed a break from some nonfiction. I do this. I'll read 2 or 3 or 4 nonfiction books, and then I'm like, you know what? I just want a good story. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. So that's all I got. So anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, we appreciate everybody tuning in, listening, watching. You can catch us on all of the podcast platforms and YouTube and Rumble if you want to watch.
Yep.
Please like and subscribe us on all the social medias. We appreciate anything that y'all can throw our way.
Yeah. I mean, of course, if you want to get a hold of us, then you can obviously get a hold of Roger through all the social media stuff. You can go over to the website, and there is a contact us link, and you can send us a quick email towards the bottom. And then again, if you want to support the show, then there's also a link right there to donate. Throw us a buck or two if you like what we're doing.
We could really use the help.
Yeah. Anything else?
That's it.
And remember, your service matters.